or get in touch and be part of organizing for that. Because if you're going to talk about conservation and the planet and humanity, then we have to address the very real destruction that militarization causes to the planet. Now, back to the Republican National Convention and the protests. Of course, as I was saying earlier, Stop Police Terror was one of the many issues at the forefront of protests at the Republican National Convention. And it's outrageous to be doing this show time and time and time again, and to think about how many shows I've devoted to the issue of police terror and mass incarceration and murder by police and the many different individuals and their stories. Now, hopefully people have heard recently that on July 5th in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, police shot and killed Alton Sterling, 37-year-old black man who was selling CDs in front of a store. On July 6th in Minneapolis, police shot and killed Philando Castile, a 32-year-old black man who was pulled over for allegedly having a broken taillight and was shot and murdered. If people haven't watched the video footage and the Facebook live stream footage that his fiance did, her name is Diamond Reynolds, very courageous woman who had the courage and the, common sense to Facebook and live stream what was happening in the aftermath of watching her fiance be shot, and has, been attacked by both, police groups and the media, and she's really a courageous, strong woman, and shout out to her. And then, of course, we've seen how the media has taken the July 7th, when 5 Dallas police officers were shot and killed, and trying to take that murder to take away from the very real fact that police gun down and murder black people on a regular basis all the time in this country. As of today, over 500 people, I believe right now it's about 537, by the time this airs it will probably be higher, have been murdered by police in this country, shot and killed by police. And rightfully so, in the wake of those very outrageous murders, thousands of people took to the streets to stand up for justice and demand an end and accountability to all these murdering cops. And hundreds of people have been arrested. So here locally, we did have a march. World Can't Wait called for a march through Waikiki, happened on July 13th. There was about 60 to 70 people that participated, and it was a really good action, and people were all out in Waikiki, including local folks, tourists, people taking video footage and whatnot. So it was a really good event, and to show people that, yes, here in Hawaii, people are speaking out against police terror and police murder. I just want to share with people something very interesting that appeared on a Honolulu Police Department officer posted on his Facebook. F Black Lives Matter. Unfriend me, please, if you're offended. I'm lock and loaded 24/7. Come. Of course, according to HPD, they are investigating whether the officer violated the department's social media or bias-based profiling policies. Well, let's just be very clear. What do you think would happen if a black person posted something like that directed towards police on their Facebook? It would not end up well for that person, that I can assure you of. And the fact that, a police officer puts that kind of very threatening message out there against people who are righteously standing up for justice. Now, in Waikiki on the march, one thing that really struck me was looking at, a lot of white faces and seeing their outrage when people were chanting Black Lives Matter. And it's something that really blows my mind every time. And there's been this narrative put out that, somehow the Black Lives Matter movement is racist. And why aren't people saying all lives matter? Well, let's be very clear. Of course, all lives matter. But under this system and this government, and especially with the, systematic racism within the system and the police, all lives don't matter, obviously, when you're running around and shooting and murdering black people and getting away with it. So it is very correct and righteous to say Black Lives Matter. So at the RNC, Carl Dix, who I've shown many times on Voices of Resistance, was in Cleveland. And I want to show you a clip from RT, Russia Today. This is from July 20th, and this is called Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter. And this is Carl Dix debating Katie Hopkins. Katie Hopkins is a British journalist for the Mail Online. She has vowed to move to the U.S. if Trump wins in November, and she calls Trump the law and order candidate. Now, of course, Carl Dix, who is a founding member of the Revolutionary Communist Party, also co-founder along with Cornel West of Stop Mass Incarceration and Stop Police Terror, says that Hopkins knows nothing of the realities in this country. And I think it's a really good debate, and I think Carl Dix is right on standing up to someone like Katie Hopkins. So check this out, and I'll be back.
The Republican National Convention is in full swing and has already evoked some strong emotions. And with Donald Trump now officially the party's presidential candidate, his fans are a step closer to seeing their dream come true. And it's not just his American fans. A few months ago, British journalist Katie Hopkins posted on Twitter that she would move to the United States if Trump wins the race to the White House. Well, let's ask her now if she's relishing the thought of potentially upping sticks and crossing the pond. Thanks for joining us, Katie. First off, are you looking for a house yet?
I'm not looking for a house yet, but I have to say I'm feeling very confident that Trump is going to win this thing. Now that he's got the nomination, now that I've seen the level of support he has here, I feel really sure, actually, he is going to be the man for the White House. And the interesting thing is, of course, the UK spent some time discussing whether to ban Donald Trump from the United Kingdom. So I think a few politicians are going to need to be saying sorry pretty soon.
He's such a character, and that's understating it. In fact, he's one of the few people I can think of who's almost as outspoken and opinionated as you are, Katie. Is that why you and many people like him so much? Because he says what he likes and he likes what he says?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You know, he has a really bombastic rhetoric, which I think really appeals to people. He's not from the establishment, and that's what people want right now. They want someone who speaks for them, who speaks for America, who's going to stand up for the people of America. And that's what Donald Trump's all about. He's saying, I'll stop people coming in the borders. I will get your jobs back for you. I will protect this country. I will stop terror. I will blow up ISIS. And we need somebody like that right now. What we have currently in the White House is a guy who's running away from everything, who's accepting everyone with open arms, and frankly spend too much time on the golf course. What we'll get with Hillary Clinton is much more of the same, and I think people are really rallying around Donald Trump. And one of the fantastic things is the more the media work against him, CNN, mainstream media and others, the more he does better. Even the Black Lives Matter movement is working in Donald's favor, because who wants to see policemen gunned down in the street?
Now, it's not just a bit about the convention. There have been some other people present. Black Lives Matter, you mentioned, they've had a demonstration there. There's also been a counter-demonstration. I understand you got to speak to some of the people taking part. Let's just have a listen to what happened.
How do you feel about this protest today? It's because it's very necessary. Apparently, we didn't do anything because we're black. Apparently, it's our fault that half of the black people that their soldiers signed got shot up by cops, and now they want to blame it on gang violence.
Gang violence. An astronomically larger amount of black people are killed by gang violence than by police every weekend.
And how do you feel about this protest?
How many were killed in Chicago last weekend? Where's your protest for that? You don't care. You probably don't even work. Get a job.
Do you feel
you don't
like
pay taxes?
right now that Obama's coming out of office, we have Hillary and we have Trump, and they're both saying the most racist things. So it's like, who do you vote for? Do you vote for the one who's more pro-white, or the one who's a little less pro-white?
I think protesting is fine, but here's the thing, is they just want to cause problems. They don't care about really bettering people's lives. and cause problems for everybody. That's all.
Do Black Lives Matter or do all lives matter? What is this argument?
I don't care. I'm worried about my life and everybody else who wants to live their own life. That's fine.
I believe all other lives matter as well, but I believe that we need to talk about importance. What's number one right now? Black lives or everybody else's lives?
What is number one right now?
Black lives matter.
Black Lives Matter more?
Black lives are the most and more. I'm going to say that's the priority right now.
So, Katie, we heard you talking now to some of the Black Lives Matter campaigners and the counter-protesters. What was the opinion you came away with from having spoken to them?
Yeah, I mean, it got quite aggressive there yesterday in the square. The police were doing a fantastic job of trying to keep people separate from each other. I learned pretty quickly what make a hole means, and what it means is get out of the way. I didn't get out of the way fast enough, so I got trampled underfoot there for a while. But what I came away with is a sense that, you know, people are here to protest because they love to protest. There was someone I met dressed as a wall protesting about Trump. Somebody else is protesting about the fact that he wants to cull immigration. Someone else is protesting about the fact that he's Islamophobic. Everybody's here to protest about something. But what I came away with from Black Lives Matter is that really they have created a divide. Black Lives Matter have created a divide because they've said Black Lives Matter more. Pick a side. Which side are you on? And I think that's really created hostility. That's why people are applauding the police in the streets, because people are now on the side of the police. I think Black Lives Matter have done a really good thing for the police, and they've done a really good thing for Donald Trump's campaign, which is all about law and order. So they're really working in his favour right now.
Okay. You've got your opinions. They're very clear, Katie. It's only one side of the story, so I want to bring in Carl Dix now. He's a founding member of the Revolutionary Communist Party, joins us on the line. Welcome, Carl. We've heard Katie's sort of gushing about Donald Trump. For a lot of people, though, he's tantamount to being a big racist. Katie also saying that the Black Lives Matter movement is basically being a dividing factor. What's your response to that?
Well, look, Ms. Hopkins is talking like she knows nothing of the reality here in this country. Because the problem is that this country has said from day one that the lives of black people matter for nothing unless they can be exploited and savagely oppressed to build up the wealth of America. From slavery, from sharecropping, Jim Crow segregation, and lynch mob terror, and today, police terror, with the police replacing the lynching mobs and lynching black people and other oppressed people here. That is the problem. Black Lives Matter represents saying black lives no longer can be treated as if they don't matter. That's what those people are saying, and I stand with them in many protests and demonstrations. But the other thing I say is that this violence of the police is actually them playing the role of frontline enforcers for a capitalist imperialist system that enforces vicious exploitation and savage oppression on black people and other people here in this country, to say nothing of what it does around the world. We need a revolution to get rid of this system and to bring in a totally different and far better system. I listened to you, now you listen to me. I did listen to you. And we in the Revolutionary Communist Party are organizing for an actual revolution at the soonest possible time. Well, look, I am talking reality. Let's talk about Alton Sterling, a man who was beaten down, tased, pinned down on the ground, and then police pull out a gun after they immobilize him and shoot him several times. Let's talk about Eric Garner, a man who was doing nothing wrong and police choked him to death. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that those and all the hundreds of other killer cops
Let's talk about the police who put their lives on the line.
Let's talk about the police who put their lives on the line
to protect people.
That is a reality that no one.
Let's talk about police.
That's a reality that no one should accept.
Guys, I want to move things on slightly.
Stuff about police having a tough job because it's not hard not to murder people. You just have to not shoot them in the back. You just have to not choke them to death.
Katie, I understand you don't agree with what Carl is saying. You don't agree with what Carl is saying. But don't you even concede that Black Lives Matter has a point?
Nonsense.
The fact is, dozens of unarmed black people were killed by the police just in this last year. Do you accept that something has to be done? You might not like the way they're doing it, but don't you agree that something needs to be done?
I think actually you're taking a very kind of a small slice of this argument. Carl, has probably seen a couple of clips on the internet, sat at home. What you need to look at is the fact that black on black killing is far greater. It's off the charts. Gang killing is off the charts. And these guys are just making a protest statement. They're creating hostility. And as a result, in Baton Rouge, cops are being gunned down. These gentlemen are out here doing a fantastic job, and ladies, protecting civilians. And that's what we need. And people like Carl are creating the very kind of environment that Trump will flourish in, because he's talking about law and order. And what we need is people that will stand up, because blue lives matter and black lives do not matter more.
Carl, I want to ask you, is there not a danger that the Black Lives Matter movement is, whether it means to or not, actually encouraging prejudice against white police officers and almost promoting sort of vigilante justice from others?
Okay, well, look, here's the real problem. The very real prejudice that has always existed in America against black people. Now, Mrs. Hopkins probably doesn't recognize any of this, but there was slavery in this country. There was Jim Crow segregation and lynch mob terror. Thousands of people, black people, lynched, and no one ever punished. And today, it's black people being killed, and we see it on TV. Maybe Ms. Hopkins closes her eyes when it happens. We see it, and those cops are never punished. People are right to stand up. People need to stand up. And look,
you know what?
I understand people being angry. I want to see that anger directed in a way that it could do something good, which is get rid of this system through revolution.
Katie.
But in this system, all lives don't matter. You have told us that from the beginning. Ms. Hopkins doesn't recognize it. She doesn't recognize the legacy and current day reality of the oppression of black people. But I am working to get people to stand up, including around things that she talks about. She says nobody wants to talk about black on black violence. I will talk about the violence in the black community because it is caused by the system too. It happens because the system has sucked the jobs out of those communities. It happens because the system has wrecked the educational thing. The system has caused the problem. The system stands up for them every day. They backed up every killer cop that's come down the road. That's why they never get punished for their murderous deeds. I blame the capitalist imperialist system because that is the cause of the problem, and that is why we're organizing right now for an actual revolution. No, you stop talking. I listen to you. I listen to you. You listen to me. No, we don't play it that way. There was a time when black people could not talk back to white people. That time is over. You don't think so. You think it's fine. And you can tell me that this black man doesn't have the right to talk.
Okay, guys, can I ask you both just to take a breath for a second?
That day is over.
You disagree about many things. I want to move it on. Katie, I want to move it on to you, if I may.
We can't talk together.
Please, just let me speak. I want to move it on.
I'm still going because you ain't listening.
Katie.
I'm still going because you've been trying to talk over me.
Katie, who's responsible for improving the situation?
I didn't agree with it, but I listen. But it's got to go the other way. If you're not going to listen to me, there ain't no reason for me to listen to you. Especially because you're talking
Carl, please, I understand you're passionate about this, but please just take a breath.
No. Tell her to listen to me. Tell her to stop talking over me, and then we can have a
Let's speak one at a time if we can.
Let her talk over me.
Katie, we have very little time. Somebody has to solve this problem.
I have not been
Shouldn't
allowed
it be
to
the
talk
government
over
doing it?
I don't play that.
Let's try the question once more.
Yeah, somebody has to solve this problem. It's dividing a lot of people. Isn't it up to the government to take the action to solve things?
I think so, and I think what we're going to see here on Thursday when Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, he's just landed here now in Cleveland. He's going to do his big speech, his big platform speech on Thursday, you know, we've had a week of understanding the fear that faces this country. We understand how Hillary Clinton would be bad for this country. We've had Donald Trump's family come out and show us the man that Donald Trump is. And we're now going to move to Donald Trump on Thursday giving us solutions. And those solutions are law and order. Those solutions are not black America and white America. That's everybody in America. And we don't need movements like Black Lives Matter, which are divisive, which are unfair, and which are unhelpful, and frankly create an environment of hostility where here everybody wants to get along and unite behind the candidate they've chosen for the White House, and that is Donald Trump.
And very briefly, Carl, because we're practically out of time now, just a quick closing statement for you.
Okay, real quick.
Carl
This is,
doesn't know how to
again,
be
nothing
brief.
to do with reality. Rudy Giuliani, well, wait a minute. Rudy Giuliani said Monday night he wants to see Donald Trump do to America what he did in New York. What he did in New York has presided over the murder of more than 100 black and Latino youth by his police force. He even called up
Rudy
cops
Giuliani's
who had
fantastic.
shot 2 Latino youth laying down on the ground. They were shot in the back
Carl, he
numerous
called out
times.
people like you who
Giuliani
love
called
playing the
them up
victim.
and congratulated them on a job well done. Again, Hopkins doesn't want to listen because some reality is being told that pushes through this. What Donald Trump's
I don't want
order
to listen
is
because you
a
love playing the
fascist
victim,
order,
Carl, and I'm not interested.
one that no one should have nothing,
Frankly, Carl,
should
you
have
bore me.
nothing to do with, and the law is to enforce that order, which will be vicious attacks on black people, vicious attacks on women, on immigrants, and all the rest. And in saying this, I ain't with Hillary either, because she represents the same capitalist imperialist system as Donald Trump, and their real difference is what's the
You're
best
with no
way
one.
to keep
You'll
that
pick
system
no
in
one,
effect,
Carl. That's
which
the
means
solution.
exploitation and oppression for 7 billion people around the planet. That's why I'm organizing for an actual revolution. That's why the leader of the revolution, Bob Avakian, has said the role of the police is not to protect and serve.
Katie, Carl, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Carl. I'm afraid we've run out of time. It's fair to say you're not going to be going for dinner together, I think. But thank you for joining us. Carl Dix on the right there, founding member of the Revolutionary Communist Party. Journalist Katie Hopkins, a bit of a revolutionary in her own way, I think, there. Many thanks.
So that was Carl Dix and the fascist, racist Katie Hopkins debating over the issue of Black Lives Matter. And I think Carl Dix really gets to the heart of the matter. You know, this movement has never been about that Black lives are more important. It's the fact that we live in a society where we have to say, hey, Black Lives Matter. And you have to understand history in order to understand how we came about with the situation where today, black people, as Carl Dix was so eloquently talking about, how the police are now the lynching mob of what used to be the old slavery days and days of Jim Crow. So understanding that history and the systemic racism and white supremacy that goes along with it. Just like living here in Hawaii, one has to understand history. You have to understand the history of colonization and the fact that these islands were overtaken by force by the U.S. military and all that goes along with that. You know, it's basic history 101 and also understanding reality. Although Katie Hopkins kept telling Carl Dix how he's trolling the internet looking at a couple of incidences. Well, as I mentioned earlier, this is a lot more than a couple of incidents. For years and years and years, I've been talking about case after case. Since the beginning of this year, over 500 people have been murdered by police. And then, of course, righteously, people rising up in the streets after Alton Sterling and Philando Castile were murdered. And I didn't even mention very recently on July 18th in Miami, a black man by the name of Charles Kinsey, who was wasn't murdered. He was shot and injured. He is a black therapist working in a care home in Florida, and he was shot by police as he tried to calm an autistic man who he was caring for and working with. And the autistic man was sitting in the road holding a truck a toy truck. Once the police came, Charles Kinsey, being a black man who understands what happens to black men when police show up, lied down on his back with his hands in the air, explaining to police the situation, that he was a caregiver, that this man was autistic. Please don't shoot this autistic man. 3 shots were fired by police, and he was shot in the leg. Luckily, he wasn't killed. So these are the kinds of things that happen on a regular basis. And what I really like about that clip, as nutty as it was, and the debate back and forth, is Carl Dix, you know, gets to the heart of the matter. And all this talk from both President Obama and other people about, you know, there's too much anger and hate, and, you know, both sides need to come together and just unite and love one another. Well, what I like about that debate and that clip is it really shows the 2 sides. And I'm sorry, those 2 sides are not coming together. And it is about which side are you on? Are you going to stand with people like Katie Hopkins, people like Trump, and, you know, all the things out there that are saying that blue lives matter and there isn't a real issue of black people being murdered by police? Are you going to stand with people being gunned down in the streets in this country by police? So I think we know which side we got to stand on, and black lives do matter. Stop police terror. Now, at the RNC, where Carl Dix was speaking and protesting, there was a lot of righteous protests, and I'm going to show you some more footage of some, but I briefly want to talk about the culture of resistance and music and why that's so important. For myself, having been an activist for over 25 years, you know, when a certain band or musician comes out with a really powerful, conscious message for humanity, it's so inspiring, and it can mean everything to the movement. And, you know, when I was a lot younger, bands like Rage Against the Machine and Public Enemy were so inspiring and still remain some of my favorite bands of all time. So I want to talk about Prophets of Rage, which was in Cleveland protesting at the Republican National Convention. And they're just amazing and awesome. And I think it's so important for musicians and other artists and people out there being part of a whole movement of resistance. And I want people to check out this clip. It's actually from Rolling Stone, and it's entitled Prophets of Rage, Take Over Cleveland.
Prophets of Rage came together with malice aforethought with the 2016 election season in our sights. First, I just couldn't stand that Trump and Sanders campaigns were referred to as raging against the machine, but these were anti-establishment candidates running as a Republican, as a Democrat. We were determined to deliver on what raging against the machine really means culturally. Some Rage Against the Machine songs that I think could possibly be of service during this troubled time. And we know a fellow by the name of Chuck D, another fellow by the name of Be Real, 2 of our principal influences when we were creating those Rage Against the Machine songs. Are they free this summer? Are they willing to stir up shit across the country? What better place than here? What better time than now?
Y'all feel powerful or what? You feel powerful? Let's be powerful together, right?
We came together to be a voice, to use this as a platform, to be a voice for the people who don't necessarily reflect the Trump view or the Hillary Clinton view, the people in the middle who have no voice. That's who we're basically representing.
We want to amplify the voices that are usually kept down and squashed. Governments like to split humans up, categorize them, keep them in one place, keep them docile. Culture likes to spread it out. We want to join human beings into being connected.
There's a momentum that happens when we're on stage that people, I think, feel and relate to, and there's nothing more gratifying being a musician to watch that circle of energy come to fruition and feel that and see that. I mean, that's the whole reason why I do what I do.
Freddie Gray, Tyrone West, Tamir Rice.
In general, across the nation and across the world, there's been some events that have lined up that boggle the mind, and it's been concentrated all in really in a one-year period in a strange type of way.
There's a lot of fear right now. You know, just walk out your door if you're a Latin or African American, possibility of coming across the wrong police officer and possibly losing your life or getting beat within inches of your life and, you know, nothing happening. It's a dangerous time right now. So I think people are voicing their opinions on how broken the system is right now.
There's no allegiance to one party, but I would tell you this is that the GOP has turned into some kind of nightmare.
They're supporting a guy who's like just an open racist. I mean, the guy wants to build a wall around the entire country. It's kind of disgusting to me to watch.
One of the things we've been raging against for some time is this grotesque economic disparity. And here, in Cleveland, you see it. There's a pretty stark contrast between what's going on inside the RNC and just outside of kind of the ring of development here in Cleveland. There are billions of people on the planet that suffer in abject poverty without adequate health care, education. There's unemployment without even adequate drinking water. They don't have a candidate in this race. They do, however, have a musical advocate in Prophet's of Rage. More than a hashtag is the motto, Make America Rage Again. And, that is our intent.
So that was Prophets of Rage, and if you haven't heard their music or know much about them, I encourage you to check out more of their songs. They, do a lot of old songs from Rage Against the Machine and both Cypress Hill and Public Enemy, but their new music is also amazing. And the fact that they were playing concerts in the streets, free concerts, outside the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, and not just like playing concerts and digging out and leaving, but actually playing concerts and inspiring people and then being part of the protests and different marches. It's really amazing, and we need so much more of that. So I want to talk a little bit more about some of the different protests that happen. In just a little bit, I'm going to show you a clip of a march that Prophets of Rage was a part of, and some other people, and that actually took place on the first day of the Republican National Convention, which was July 18th. But throughout the week, there was lots of other events as well, and I encourage people to check out more events online as well. On Wednesday, the 20th of July, the Revolution Club did a flag burning, righteously so, outside the Republican National Convention, and 17 people were arrested, including Joey Johnson. Joey Johnson, of course, is the infamous flag burner who was arrested, I believe it was at the 1982 Republican National Convention, and his case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually ruled that flag burning is a protected form of free speech. Yet, in Cleveland, outside the Republican National Convention, it's obviously not a protected form of speech, and Joey Johnson and many other activists were arrested. Thursday night, for Trump's big speech, fascist speech, Medea Benjamin with Code Pink. Code Pink is, you know, notoriously going into different events and disrupting and holding up banners and signs. And Medea Benjamin went into the lion's den, as I like to say, and got some press coverage of interrupting Donald Trump's closing speech. So shouts out to all the protesters who were protesting in Cleveland. Now, I don't know if people actually watched a lot of the Republican National Convention, what was happening inside. Unfortunately, there wasn't a huge amount of media coverage for the protests outside, but you can find it online when you search for it. But, you know, all of the major news sources, such as, you know, MSNBC, CNN, even Fox News, was running nonstop footage from inside the Republican National Convention. And when you look at, you know, the faces in there and what's happening, it's very frickin' frightening. I felt like I was watching, like, you know, a modern, like, Nazi Germany rally. It's mind-blowing to see all this fear and racism and women hating and Muslim hating and build up this wall kind of stuff, just, you know, over and over and over again. And then when you see the kinds of people outside protesting, now those are the kind of people I want to hang with. Those are the kind of people I want to build a better world with. Definitely not the kinds of people inside the Republican National Convention. So the last clip I want to show you is from Democracy Now! And it's of a march on the first day called End Poverty Now, and Prophets of Rage, as well as lots of other types of groups were part of it. And what I really, really love about the footage is it shows the really diversity of all the people taking part in this End Poverty Now march and the many different issues. From Black Lives Matter to, you know, people's farmlands, immigration, abortion rights, and the list goes on and on. But all these kinds of people coming together for End Poverty Now March and uniting on that and the vast diversity of the people that took part in it. So check out this clip from Democracy Now! End Poverty Now March, protesting at the Republican National Convention.
Our special expanded 2-hour daily broadcast for this week in Cleveland at the Republican National Convention and next week in Philadelphia at the Democratic Convention. Well, yes, we are covering both conventions inside and out, from the streets to the corporate suites to the convention floors. As the RNC began here on Monday, thousands rallied outside to protest Donald Trump's candidacy. And the largest protest of the day, thousands took part in the End Poverty Now March for Economic Justice. The march began after a concert by Prophets of Rage, a new project of Public Enemy's Chuck D and Rage Against the Machine's Tom Morello. After the concert, Democracy Now's Mike Burke spoke to march participants, beginning with the musician Tom Morello.
We are Prophets of Rage, and we've come here to confront the racist, misogynist, imperialist policies of the RNC and provide a counter voice to what they're saying inside the convention center. We're saying something very different out here on the streets. We're not here to give Donald Trump a message. We're here to put wind in the sails of the people who are standing up against his message.
Stand down! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
My name is Connie Burton. I'm from Tampa, Florida. I'm here representing the Black People Advancement and Defense Organization. The reason why we're here is because we want to expose the contradiction that for the last 50-plus years, we've been dealing with the issue of poverty, and all we see is people on the top getting rich and fat, while the people at the bottom, they're poor and oppressed, continuing the same cycle for the last 50 years.
What is your message to Donald Trump?
Well, it's not going to be the America that he think when he said he wants his America back. We hear those as cold messages that reeks with white supremacy. And if he think that the Africans going to live peaceful on the plantation, which is America, he has another thought coming. We don't feel any better under Hillary Clinton, and so we plan on being disruptive from the first day. Whoever is elected to office, it's not going to be any peace for them as well.
That they build
to tear us apart. We'll never be as strong as the walls of our hearts. The walls that they build to tear us apart. We'll never be as strong as the walls of our hearts.
Waldemar Velasquez, president of the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, AFL-CIO, and we're here telling the Republican National Committee that we want a fair day's pay for a fair day of work. That's all we want.
And what is your assessment of Donald Trump?
It's going to be very interesting to see if he's going to live up to his big words surrounding how he operates his own businesses. I mean, he's one of the greatest outsourcers there is, and he's talking to all this nationalistic trade stuff. I wonder how he's going to apply to his own personal business. So that's going to be a very interesting challenge for him.
If you had a chance to meet with Donald Trump, what would you tell him?
I would say, give me a specific plan how you're going to make good at ending all these global corporations and their international supply chains that marginalize people here in the U.S. and in the countries where they operate.
My name is Nozomi Ikuda, and I'm a local church pastor, actually Denison Avenue United Church of Christ. What's going on in our country is really all about division, and people have to come together, you know, learn how to understand each other, learn how each of us has to give a little bit to have a better understanding of people who've had different experiences and backgrounds.
If you had a chance to speak to Donald Trump, what would you tell him?
Well, I'm a Christian, right? And so what was Jesus about? About love, about respect, about treating your neighbors you want to be treated, right? And that's not what I'm hearing. He can say whatever he wants about almost any group that he's assuming he's not going to vote for him. Black people, Muslims, women, gay people. And is that how you build community? Is that the kind of society we want? We want a society where everybody has a place and an opportunity to raise their families with some decency and dignity.
My name is Rod Stars.
My name is G1.
And together we're Rebel Diaz.
Why are you out here in the streets of Cleveland?
We're out here in the streets of Cleveland fighting against the fascists, otherwise known as Donald Trump. He's a racist, and it's a problem for this country that he's even the candidate. A lot of folks thought it was a joke, that it was part of a reality show gone wrong, but the reality is that the reality show gone wrong is the current state of the U.S. and America. So we're here demanding, you know what I'm saying, freedom for our people, justice for all those murdered by police, and at the same time saying dump Trump and his, racist, fascist ways. We're immigrants, so we stand up for the immigrant community as well.
Now, I know you just performed at the concert. I was wondering if you could share a couple verses with our audience right now.
See, before I draw the line, let me welcome you close to all the folks who knew Obama, so the people are hoax. So the suckers from communities want us poor, but you know we back at it, ready for war. Here at RNC, please, ROD and G1, ready to run, ready to run. Share with democracy now. I'm gonna show y'all how we do this right now. We out on these streets, rocking to no beats, it's acapella. Old school NWA like DJ Yella. We just seen Be Real and Prophets of Rage. Man, I was amazed, but best believe we gonna fight against Trump. Trump gonna get dumped like a bad date. Freestyle rock stars, you know that we great. I inspire the youth every time when I rock with these Iraqi troops, veterans against war. What I got in store, I got ill metaphors, cause we gotta knock down all the walls. Freestyle rock stars, cause you know we smoke you like bomb walls. Peace.
My name is Garrett Reppenhagen. I'm with Iraq Veterans Against the War and Vets versus Hate. I'm out here because, you know, Trump doesn't know service, doesn't know military service, he doesn't know community service. The only person he's ever served is himself. You know, and I think he's trying to make himself great again, not America. And I served this country, and I've been lied to, and I've betrayed, and I'm here basically using my First Amendment right, a right that I fought for. And, you know, I'm going to express that to say that Trump's not an option for the United States. He's a racist. He's making our country less safe. He's increasing domestic violence. He's destroying our national security. That's not what I fought for. If you had a chance to speak to Donald Trump, what would you tell him? I would tell him that he should end his race, that he's not our candidate, that we don't want him as Americans, that he's only going to destroy everything that we worked to build, and he'll erode our country, not make it great.
And what is, can you talk a little bit more about is it Vets Against Hate?
Yeah, Vets versus Hate. It's a bunch of veterans that just kind of started around a hashtag, realizing that Trump's racist speech didn't really represent our values as American veterans, that we served alongside Muslim Americans, we served alongside Muslims in Iraq and Afghanistan, we served along, Mexican Americans, we served along all sorts of people. The military is a very diverse place, and we work with coalitions all across the world to get our job done. And, he's destroying that. Every time he opens his mouth with a racist statement using hate speech, it destroys that. So we've gathered basically as a group of veterans that kind of have that common cause and common mission to oppose what he's saying.
Can you tell us your name, the group you're with, and why you're out on the streets today?
Absolutely. My name is Annie Kroll. I am the Northern Ohio organizer with NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio. We are the statewide affiliate of NARAL Pro-Choice America, the National Abortion Rights Action League. So we are the state-level advocate ensuring that abortion stays safe and legal in Ohio for all its residents. We're here specifically for the End Poverty Now March because we want to push onto the platform of the End Poverty Now March that without full spectrum access to abortion care and reproductive health services, you cannot eliminate poverty.
There's no hiding place down here. I went to the rock to hide my face. The rock cried out, no hiding place.
Chuck D. Public Enemy #1 Prophets of Rage. Here in the streets of Cleveland, Black Lives Matter. Because Black lives, people have seen in history, Black lives, all the history all the way up to damn near Baton Rouge in Minnesota, Black lives didn't matter, especially with acquittals. I was just talking a second ago with this gentleman that, we overstand when the flags are half-mast, but in this city, flags should have been at half-mast for Tamir Rice and all the people that got killed from brutality.
What is your assessment of Donald Trump?
He is the most inappropriate person ever to think that he can actually run a country. I'm like, how come this dude doesn't just decide to run a town or a city first? Start from there. What is this? I want to be at the top of the pile. That's the arrogance of businessmen. I got to be the top kahuna or nothing else. So that arrogance is what gets me about the Donald Trump. This ain't no TV show. Ain't The Apprentice. Okay, this is your boss here. I can run America like a corporation. I'm like, dude, man, it's like, you know what it is? It's disrespectful to think that somebody could come from left field and do the job of a person who holds public office just because they feel like it. Gotta do the work. Gotta do the work.
Peace, my name is Luke Nephew of the Peace Poets. I'm here with Witness Against Torture and with my crew, the Peace Poets. And we're here in Cleveland to support the good people of Cleveland who we know are about justice.
What are your thoughts about Donald Trump, especially his call to, bring back waterboarding and what he says even more?
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that Donald Trump said the words torture works. And it's profoundly ignorant of the truth, as well as in contrast to the United States military that told their infantry for decades and decades never to torture a prisoner because the intelligence you get from torture will never, ever be correct, reliable, or anything that they can use. That's the United States military. I was in a Senate hearing where I heard a United States general in Iraq say the presence of Guantanamo and the torture of prisoners in Guantanamo made U.S. soldiers and U.S. citizens less safe. So he is saying the words that torture works and advocating for indefinite detention for the practices that profile Muslims and result in the torture of human beings simply because they're othered. And he's denying the fact that both the professional psychologists and the professional of the U.S. military say that torture does not work.
Well, my name's Ryan Harvey. I'm from Baltimore. I'm a musician. I'm an activist. I've long been an organizer in the anti-war movement, often working with the Iraq Veterans Against the War. And then I play music, and I also co-own a record label called Firebrand Records that I own with Tom Morello. putting out radical political music.
Yeah. We just heard you perform at the concert, and there was one song that really stood out, and it was actually about Donald Trump's father.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that song?
Yeah. So that song is called Old Man Trump, and I recorded that a few months ago with Ani DeFranco and with Tom Morello. That song was written by Woody Guthrie originally in 1950. His landlord was Fred Trump, Donald Trump's father. And of course, Fred Trump, believe it or not, was a bigot, a racist, a xenophobe, and a slumlord, all mixed into one, as often is the case. And so Woody wrote these lyrics about him, but like never recorded it. He was getting old. He was starting to die, you know. And at the time, Fred Trump was just a bad landlord, right, and a bigot. And now it's like what a relevant name to bring up. So it was kind of like amazing to be able to sort of like resurrect Woody Guthrie's voice and add it into the current debate about this rising far right, this like fascistic rhetoric that's coming out of not just Trump, but Trump's base. So, you know, it's like what's more American than Donald Trump and Woody Guthrie? You know?
Could you sing a little bit of the song for us?
So it's like, I suppose that old man Trump knows just how much racial hate he drawed up in that blood pot of human hearts when he drawed that color line here at his Beach Haven family project. So Beach Haven was the name of the apartment. It's still there. You know, Woody was living there, and the second verse goes into sort of like what he would do if he ran the apartment and everyone would be welcome. And then, you know, the chorus, oh, here we go. Yeah.
How does it feel to sing Woody Guthrie songs surrounded by by police?
I think I've done it before, but it always feels relevant, you know?
We want to tell the Republican Party, quit bringing that division here. Don't bring no polarization here. Don't bring no xenophobia here. Don't bring no Islamophobia here.
My liberation is your liberation, and your liberation is my liberation. So let me hear the people say, let's get free, let's get free, let's get free, let's get free. My liberation is your liberation, and your...
Special thanks to Democracy Now!'s Mike Burke and Hani Massoud. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. We are breaking with convention, war, peace, and the presidency. Back in a minute.
So when I see footage of people protesting the Republican National Convention, I don't know about you, but it makes me really, really happy. And we need a lot more of it. People should be out in the streets in huge numbers calling attention to all of these things that are happening. Now, earlier when I was talking about the Black Lives Matter and all of the horrendous murders and killings by police, and I mentioned that we had a march in Waikiki on July 13th with about 60 to 70 people taking part in that, and it was a really good march. Something important that I forgot to mention that I just want to share quickly with people is, a lot of times people are like, why do you guys do this here? No one's paying attention. It doesn't do anything. Now, we definitely got our message heard and very visible being in Waikiki. At the very end of the march, when we were coming back up by the zoo area, a young guy who happened to be Sheldon Halleck's nephew joined us and got very emotional and thanked us for being out there. Sheldon Halleck, who's from Hawaii, was murdered by police. He was tased to death in the road in downtown Honolulu on March 17th of 2015. And, those kinds of things mean so much to you when you're an activist and you're out on the streets and taking up these issues. And the fact that he came to join us at the end and thank us just really meant a lot. And, to all the families of people who've been murdered by police, my heart is with you. So I was showing, footage of people protesting the Republican National Convention, very righteously so. I want to remind people that people will also be protesting the Democratic National Convention happening in Philadelphia. By the time this show airs, the Democratic National Convention will already have taken place, and I can't wait to see all the footage of people protesting that. So thank you for watching Voices of Resistance, and to all the protesters at the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention, it's right to rebel. Thanks for watching Voices of Resistance.
A war for money and a war for souls. A war on terror, a war on drugs, a war on kindness, a war on hugs, a war on birds and a war on bees. They got a war on hippies trying to save.
In the meantime, you're here forward deployed. You're here ready to fight tonight. It's part of that readiness I talked about. I mean, I would ask you, if you got the call tonight, if somebody called you at 1800, no matter where you were, and said, hey, remember the commandant talked about being ready to go, pick a place. Doesn't matter. I need you down here with all your stuff packed, ready to go at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Would you be ready?
She came up and kissed me one day.
It was an impulse. I just grabbed him and I kissed him on the lips and I ran away.
Because I was like 20 years old. It's not like something you talk about marriage all the time.
But I asked for her number. She wouldn't give me her number.
No, I think he liked me first for sure because
She's hot. We met in a grocery store.
We were in a class together.
Came up to me one day, says, I got this perfect girl for you.
he was a good dancer, but not too good.
Like he was my soulmate.
She's my queen. Of course, I'm the king.
I said, I have to ask you something. And she said, what? And I kneeled down, and
she was laughing and trembling. She gets so embarrassed.
What did I say? I said, will you marry me or will you be my wife?
Will you be my wife?
He proposed to me on my birthday.
And she said, yes. Are you sure?
I'm sorry.
Programs airing on the Olelo Community Media channels are presented by independent producers in the community's interest. The opinions and views expressed do not necessarily represent the views of Olelo Community Media or its management.
We do it island style. From the mountain to the ocean, from the windward to the leeward side.
Aloha Aina. Aloha Papakolea. Mahalo nui for welcoming us here and having your Aloha Aina of Papakolea. This is the second time that our hui has come here to share with the Papakolea community. And again, I mahalo you very, very deeply because Papakolea is one of the strongholds of Kanaka Maoli. Today, we're going to share with you this process. And this process that we're talking about for our community is a community process. It's to define by you about where you want your community to go, the direction that you'd like your community to go in. And we really honor the Papakolea Community Association, all the organizations that are here, because you guys have a long history of taking care of your own. And we want to honor that, and we actually come to you guys from Mana'o. We're going to have some speakers that will share things, but the majority of the day, we would like to hear what Papakolea wants for Papakolea. I'm one of the co-organizers and founders of Aloha Aina, and mahalo nui. And so the next wonderful person that I would like to introduce up to the mic is one of the people that has been a great longtime leader, warrior, struggler for the Kanaka Maoli people. He's been involved in a long time with struggles like Kaho'olawe, He's also been a professor over at the University of Hawaii. He also represents our people at the United Nations. And I feel very honored to have him be a part of our community. I'd like to introduce Professor John Osorio. So Professor John Osorio, he's a prolific writer, he's a researcher, he's a musician, he is a wonderful father and a husband. He is one of our wonderful, our leaders who is a great example of sharing and learning and joy. All right. And so he's, for those, who of you here know John Osorio's music? What's your favorite song? The Hawaiian Eyes? Hawaiian Soul. Yeah, that's my favorite too. Most of them are kind of high up there, but yeah, I would say Hawaiian Soul is my, it goes up a little bit more than that. But yeah, that's one of my favorite songs. And that's a story for those of you who do you know what you want to share what the story is about it? So the story of Hawaiian Soul is, for those of you who remember all the struggles that we happened to our community, one of the struggles that we had was protecting Kaho'olawe, yeah, and the bombing that happened over there. And he was one of the great leaders of that. And during that struggle, we lost a great warrior. And who was that warrior? Okay, one was George Helm. And what is the second one was? Kimo Mitchell. Two wonderful warriors for our people that were lost at sea. And since then, there have also been many other warriors that we have lost, but we remember them. And this song is one that we bring out. And most recently, he sang it in honor of 3 of our leaders that we lost recently, Papa Kekuni Blaisdell, Puhi Hipau Ahmad, and Leandra Y. So, Makakau? Sure, okay. So, I welcome to the mic. John Osorio.
Thank you, my dear. Mahalo nui to all of you for allowing Aha Aloha Aina to be here and to present, but also to share with you. And thank you for welcoming me here. It's really wonderful to be a part of this community, even for a little while. If it's all right with you, I won't sing Hawaiian Soul at the beginning. I had a different idea in mind, because I want to talk a little bit about community building, and then I will sing Hawaiian Soul at the end. I grew up in Keaukaha, which is Hawaiian homelands on Hawaii Island in Hilo. We weren't born in Keaukaha, but my family moved there when I was very, very young, and I grew up there as a child. And one of the things that I learned in Keaukaha is how much of a community it is. The real beauty of places like Keaukaha and Papakolea and Nanakuli and Waimanalo and Anahola is not just the Aina, but it's actually the people who live in that community. And they take care of each other. They fight with each other. They cause a great deal of hoo-hoo as well, but they really do care for each other. They look after each other and they pay attention. So I'm going to sing this song from Keaukaha because I didn't have time to learn a song from Papakolea, and because Keaukaha is, after all, our Aina. And it's just to express how really, really, really beautiful these communities are, and how, more than anything else, we need to strengthen them. So the song was written by Lena Machado. E moani nei I ka paipu I hala me hana kuupoli I ka hanu o ka ihu pone me ke aloha pilipa'a Carnation ivilia me maile lauli iliwaili ke aloha pumehana darling sweet lay ona oya kaha e moani nei me ke kamalani o ke o kaha Carnation ivilia me maile lauli iliwaili ke aloha pumehana darling sweet lay ona oya kaha e moani nei me ke kamalani o ke o kaha e moani nei me ke kamalani o ke o kaha Thank you very much. Mahalo. So I'm just going to make this really as short and as to the point as I can. In 2014, hundreds of Kanaka Maoli, probably people from this community as well, went down to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. And they went over several occasions. Mostly we went there in order to slow the Office of Hawaiian Affairs support for Kana'i Oluwalu and what eventually became the Na'iaupuni Constitutional Convention. The people who went there were trying to get OHA to stop, to pause. You know, the state had passed the law that created the Hawaiian role. We saw people, not very many people, signing up for that role. We saw different ways in which the supporters of Kana'i Oluwalu tried to make that role bigger than it was. And we saw the Office of Hawaiian Affairs required by law to pay for that role and for the convention with our money, with money that really was set aside for the benefit of all Kanaka Maoli. And we tried to tell the Office of Hawaiian Affairs trustees, and really there were hundreds of us there. I remember one day in particular in which we were asked to leave the room, so hundreds of us were outside singing patriotic songs, and we sang so loud, the voices were so loud and penetrating that they basically had to stop their business until we stopped. I remember that really clearly. And yes, it was a wonderful sight. People kept asking, why are you stopping this progress? Don't you want to move forward? And the answer that we gave over and over again is, yes, we want to move forward, but we want to move forward properly. And what was actually wrong with Kana'i Oluwalu and with the Na'iaupuni process? The most important thing that was wrong is that organization really didn't represent our people. It did not represent the Lahui. What it did represent was the wishes of the state government. It did represent the wishes of a few community organizations like the Council for Native Hawaiian Affairs. It did represent the wishes of some of the leadership in Shah, but it did not represent the dreams and hopes and aspirations of all of Kanaka Maoli, or at least even a majority of the Kanaka Maoli. And the reason it didn't is because they never asked us. They didn't. If you think about this, you realize that the OHA process and the Na'iaupuni process was all about, hey, whoever wants to be a delegate, see if you can get 25 people to support you. And so there were like 250, 260 people who were candidates for delegates. Then the U.S. Supreme Court says, hey, you can't have this election. So what they do is they take all the delegates who want to participate, and they say, you will represent the people in the community at this constitutional convention. None of this was pono, none of this really, and the problem is that none of this could ever really work, because they weren't speaking for anybody. This is not to say that Naiyaupuni isn't a community, it is. Shaw is a community, CNHA is a community, but they are only 3 or 4 communities, and they do not speak for the communities of Papakolea. They do not speak for the communities of Waimanalo and Nanakuli and Keaukaha or Anahola. They don't speak for all of those communities because they've never really tried. They have never, in OHA, in all of the years that OHA has been sort of doing this, what they call nation building, have they come here to an organization, to a day like this to talk to you? Are they here today? Have they come to talk to you about what it is to ask you what you want? I have been to OHA organizational talks, and what they always do is they say, here's our plan, here's how you fit into it. But has anybody ever asked you, what is it you want? What is it you need as a Kanaka Maoli? What will make this nation real and valuable, vai to you? They have not done this because OHA doesn't believe in that kind of process. What OHA believes in is, we get a bunch of experts together, we figure out what is good, we set this up, and we tell people, this is it. It cannot work. It cannot work because we're talking here not about just some kind of organization or agency. We are talking about nationhood. And nationhood requires commitment from the people. It requires a sense of loyalty, a sense of trust. A nation really only is as good as its people. All right, so we were telling the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, stop this process, stop Naiyaupuni, stop the support for Naiyaupuni, stop the support for the convention, and engage in real nation building. And when they asked us what we meant by that, we said, we want a process that might take the next 10, 15, or 20 years. We want you to take the money that you've been spending for this organization and actually train and hire our own people to go out into the communities and find out what people want. What if in gatherings like this, instead of having a whole bunch of people tell you what you should want, we had people saying, okay, you guys represent the community of Papakolea. What is it that you need as a community from your government, from your national government? How would you like to see this happen? And break people up. Take days to do this. And remember this, we're not really only talking about physical communities, because Hawaiians don't only live in physical communities. You know, many Hawaiians are fortunate to live on Hawaiian homelands around other Hawaiians. Many other Hawaiians like me don't. But we are still part of Hawaiian communities. We have fishermen who are part of Hawaiian communities. They, regardless of the fact that they don't fish in the same fisheries, they face the same kinds of challenges in the future, right? Fisheries that are increasingly depleted of fish, coral that's being killed by global warming and by runoff. We have farmers, right? They don't all live in the same farming community, but they face similar kinds of situations. Lack of water, the taking of water by big organizations like Alexander and Baldwin. And you know, when you hear from those people, you hear from those people when they go to state legislatures and city councils and protest laws that don't meet their needs. Instead of waiting to hear them protest, why don't we go to those communities and say, what do you need written into the laws of our nation that will protect your resources and protect your access to them? Do you see where I'm going with this? Nation building is something that should take place from the bottom up. It needs to consult with the people who live in communities. It needs to consult with different kinds Hawaiians who engage in different kinds of activities, and it needs to put this together over what will probably be a very long time. but it is the only thing in my mind that can work. And so the last thing I'm going to say about this is, and I say this with aloha to all of the people who have worked so hard to reinstate the Kingdom of Hawaii. I believe that their intentions are right and correct. But I think that even the process by which we're working toward the kingdom still does not consult the people enough. We need to go out into the communities. We need to actually ramp up our engagement with communities and get people to spell out very, very, very specifically what it is they require from their government. And if the office of, and I want to say this, I do not think that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is going to sponsor this tomorrow. But if we could have taken that $4 million that they have spent over the process of Kana'i'oluwalu and Na'iaupuni, if we had taken that $4 million and trained Kanaka Maoli facilitators and hired them to go out into the communities and paid basically for the ability to hold these things and committed ourselves to do this over 5 years or 6 years or even a decade if necessary, we would be much further along now in the process of creating a unified Hawaiian government than we are. We have never been farther away from it, actually, because Na'iaupuni stands as something that many of us oppose. So how do we start this? If we cannot get wealthy organizations like OHA to sponsor this, then we need to start this process on our own, and I think that's exactly what Aha Aloha Aina has done. And that's why we have to give them a hand. With very limited resources, but a great deal of willingness to put in time and effort and their own mana, this is what we can create, and we can do more. But we need people to basically say, how do we find the money? How do we find the funds to be able to do this on a bigger scale? And we need to do this. That is actually the answer that we need to give to organizations like SHA and CNHA and Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Your way doesn't work. Your way doesn't work. This will work. Going to the communities, taking the time, finding out what they want, not simply prescribing to them. This is the answer to nation building, and it needs to start. Aha Aloha Aina has started this process. We need to continue it, and I'm grateful for the chance to talk to you about this today. Mahalo. Oh, are you in a hurry? Should I hurry? Are you sure? Okay, it's just this one song then. For George Hellman, Kimo Mitchell, who were lost on Kaho'olawe Island. I can recall the way your voice would fill the room, and we would all be stilled by your melody, and now your voice is gone, and to the sea belongs all of the gentle songs that you had harbored. Hawaiian soul, how could you leave us? You've not been lost at sea. to seek your destiny. That older voices called and drowned your laughter, but I believe you knew what you would have to be, a beacon in the storm to guide us after Hawaiian soul. How could you leave us? You've not been lost at sea. You're only wandering. Hawaiian soul, we sing your melodies and send them out to sea. You know the harmony. Mahalo. Thank you very much, everybody.
Mahalo nui, John. I love his music. It kind of almost makes me kind of want to cry though. But like, in a good way, the kind you like cry because you're just in love with our people.
Mehana kuupoli I ka hanu o ka ihu e hoi pone me ke aloha pilipa'a Carnation I vilia me maile Ke aloha pumehana, darling, sweet lay, ona oia kaha, e moani nei, me ke kamalani o ke o kaha. Carnation vilia me maile lauli ilivaili ke aloha pumehana darling sweet lay ona oia kaha e moani nei me ke kamalani o ke o kaha e moani nei me ke kamalani o ke o kaha
ocean from our windward to the leeward side.
Thank you, Brett. Okay, we're going to get started because I told Dean Soifer we're going to have a little competition here. See if we can finish. Oh, okay, thanks. But I won't say that on Olelo, huh? All right, we're about ready to start technical session number 2. And I just want to make sure everybody's here. Justice Kumar, Sherry, Justice Wilson, Judge Richardson, I think will be coming in. I hope Judge Castanetti is not going to be available, unfortunately. John Foster, I know you're here, John, sitting right in front of me, and David Sakota, thank you. And then some of my IUCN students are sprinkled in here as well. So with the timing, we'll try to stick to the allotted time, particularly for our distinguished speakers. And myself and the students and my fellows, I think we will squish accordingly to try to come in somewhere around, well, we'll see how we're doing. If we can hit tea and cookies at 3:30, I think we'd be lucky. But did you enjoy the lunch? Okay, good. Thank you so much. And the music and the dance, incredible. All right. I'll keep my remarks very brief. I am very pleased to just simply play a moderating role in this session, but this topic is near and dear to my heart. The establishment of the Environmental Court in Hawaii is really, as Judge Cardoza on Maui said, and as Justice Wilson likes to repeat, a historic occasion. We are joining the global movement toward environmental courts and tribunals. You're going to hear more about that. But today we have a wonderful opportunity to both think locally and globally in this technical session. And very appropriately, the leader, one of our sparks, has been, as you've heard, Justice Kumar. So I think as much time as we can spend with him and hear from him is time incredibly well spent. So once again, Justice Swatantra Kumar, National Green Tribunal, presiding chairperson.
Okay, so I'm back after lunch to all of you. Well, this time I wish to devote to all of you, having given you a little insight into the functioning of the National Green Tribunal. Firstly, I would go a little wider than the India Tribunal and look at the tribunals all over the world. Now, today, if we look into the legal history of the world, the various courts and tribunals, the establishment of environmental specialized courts or tribunal is a very recent phenomenon. So it's like, I would frankly say that it is at the infant stage. But the courts all over the world have been playing a very positive role in protecting the environment and dealing with the environmental issues. Whether you talk of states, whether you talk of UK, whether you talk of any other countries or the South Asian countries, they have been dealing with these issues with a lot of emphasis. But I think, and I would not hesitate in saying, that the Indian Supreme Court and the High Courts have been very progressive on environmental issues. I would like to give you a little background into the Supreme Court, because I had the privilege of being the judge of the Supreme Court for a period of 3 years before I took over as the chairperson of the National Green Tribunal. See, all the environmental protection cases were taken either suo motu or at the application, like MC Mehta, or you talk of Govardhan Mal case. You know, all these environmentalists cases were taken by the Supreme Court of India, and much larger cases were taken suo motu by the courts. they enunciated the principles of environmental protection. Today we are trying to talk of climate change. You know, it sounds a very technical term, and we try to make it as complicated as possible. So what I feel is that the effort seems to be of the institutions to make it more complex, which is so simple. Climate is human. It is something to do with nature and humans and nothing else. So we should try and simplify it rather than make it so complex by, you know, scientists try to add to it as many technical terms as they can. The legal experts try to make it as linguistically difficult as it is possible. So we don't try and approach the climate change issues or the environmental issues, what I'll call, because climate is a part of environmental science. So environmentally, what we are talking about is in fact where we are missing. We need to bring, whether we are a court or we are a tribunal, we need to bring it in the common understanding of the human beings. It should not sound to them as what is the interpretative doctrines applied by the courts to interpret the law, which is so simple and which is of a human conduct. Environment is nothing but a human conduct. So you essentially need to have something which is commonly understood, which is commonly accepted. To my mind, the greatest feature and contribution of courts in the world can be only and only that how much acceptability do you draw from people. If your judgments, if your awards are not acceptable to the public at large, your effort, to my mind, is minus. It has done nothing. And if we are able to, then I would say that all the courts and the tribunals must essentially make things, firstly, easily accessible. That is the basic fundamentals of rule of law. Either you're talking about the accessibility to justice must be easy. Affordability should be there. Next, there should be expeditious disposal. There should be understanding of environmental jurisprudence by the people who are involved in the adjudicatory process. I don't exclude the judges, lawyers, and even the common man who's coming on for that cause of action. And then lastly, which is most important, is that you pronounce the orders which are implementable and acceptable to the public. As I mentioned to you in the earlier part of the day, if we are talking of municipal solid waste, if you are not in the habit of segregating waste at the source, at the collection point, rest of the things becomes immaterial. Then the entire effort goes double the time, 3 times, and makes a mess. And I would give you an example. In Delhi, there is a huge MSW plant which is causing havoc to the living of the people around the plant because it generates a lot of ash containing carbon elements. And therefore, those people sometime in the morning have a black face. Now, that is the reason. Now, if we investigated that matter, we found that the basic default coming into the working of that plant was as a result of mixed waste. Because a plant also has a standardized capacity to treat a particular kind of a waste. If you are going to generate 80% of the wet waste and put it into the incinerators, and then find out that the burning issues are the capacity of the plant to generate power is one thing, but to emit ashes and gases, which are not good for the health, is a result of no proper segregation. Therefore, we have compelled that unit now to put up an automatic segregation plant before he can put the waste into the plant for its settlement. So I would think that what is more important is that people should be able to, it will reduce. If people are able to accept it, that yes, I'm going to keep 3 bags at home, I'm going to segregate the waste, I'm going to give the separate bag to the collector, and the collector will collect it, transport it properly. He transports it in a way that whole truck is open to the air, and by the time he speeds up to the plant, half of the waste is already on the roads. So this is what I think is, I will call, public acceptability of the judgment of the court. To me, it appears to be very simple. Howsoever difficult language I use to describe this, I think the problem is very simple. So these are the issues on which I was talking to you. Telling you about the powers of the tribunal, I am an Indian, and I, in fact, was very impressed yesterday. I went around to these shopping malls here, to get some shopping done. So suddenly we had a Hawaii shirt. So we were deciding, Dennis had been kind enough to invite us for a dinner at the Fun Family. So we thought we all will try and go in the Hawaii shirts. So we thought of buying them. So when we were about to buy them, then we read they are made in India. So I found it as a beautiful link of thinking, that the people here are wearing the clothes manufactured in our country. So I find a great link to the Hawaiian people because I think it's a great effort. And the colorful cloth made and stitched in India looks smarter on your bodies in Hawaii. So, yes. So what I was coming back to, in fact, was that the power of Suomoto, for example, which I was mentioning earlier part of the day to you also, is that the Suomoto power, we understand of the law that where a court is established by a process of law, that means a law which is enacted by a competent legislation is established to do adjudicatory functions and determine the dispute between the parties or disputes at large, then it automatically has powers to do justice, what is necessary to be done for doing that justice. That is the view that we have taken in one of the huge judgments which I have written around 400 pages. So we have taken a view that the Tribunal of India has the trapping of a court and therefore has all the powers that are vested in a court. So Suomoto is one power which I think is very important in environmental issues. There are cases which I mentioned to you in the morning about the mining case. It is somebody else who approached on their behalf because those poor people who had died, their families were in Bangladesh, so nobody could come to India. They were daily wages, so somebody was given 15,000 rupees for the death, somebody was given 20,000 and they were sent home. We were not concerned, as I told you in the morning, not with the compensation. We were concerned with the environmental issues. So that what we did was that was an action taken by the High Court Suomoto and transferred to us. Now, in one of the cases which I'll tell you, which is a very, very, kind of ordinary thing to look at, but a very significant from the environmental point of view. There is a place in India which is called the state of Himachal Pradesh. It is a beautiful state like Jammu and Kashmir, which is full of hills. It has range of hills, very thick forests, and very beautiful place to live like. So the height is around about 7,000 to 11,000 feet from the sea level. So it's quite a nice place. So one fine builder got very wise. He thought the best way to make money is to enter into, there was a lady who owned the whole hill. And the entire hill that she owned had very dense forest, partly, and partly the land was available. So this great man thought this was the best time to make a buck. Property values were very high. So he entered into an agreement to sell off that entire hill for something like 30 crores or something, which would, I don't know how many millions would it make. So he agreed for that and he bought that land. And before even land was transferred to him, the great man chopped off 500 trees overnight. And those trees were more than 40 to 50 years old. And they were cheel trees, they were deodar trees, they are hill trees which are having a huge trunks like this much of a trunk of the tree. They're very dense and very thick. Now he cut the trees and he thought he will make a huge hotel and a building complex there, sell it for millions. So this came to our notice. We were going to Shimla for holding a special circuit bench at Shimla. So we issued suo motu notice. Now, could it be said, I think there could be a view, and we have received that criticism, that we became very proactive. So we issued a notice which we shouldn't have. Let somebody, if somebody was having a grievance, come to the tribunal and raise an issue. So there was a section of the society which felt, and particularly even the part of the judges felt, that we shouldn't have done that. But that's how it is, that judges are always opposed to judges. So we issued notice, and we asked the forest department, we imposed a compensation, instant compensation, proper computation on the analysis reports to be submitted by an expert committee to us. We imposed 30 crores of compensation on them, 30 lakhs. So 30 lakhs compensation instantly was to be paid. That was to be utilized for planting of 4,000 trees. He had taken out 400. So we told him 4,000 trees. And all of them will be planted at the places from where the trees have been cut. And if that area is found to be short, then on the government land. And his whole project went for a 6, which I think was a very fair thing to do, because you can't kill the nature like that. You know, the impact of those removal of 500 trees on the climate of the Shimla would be totally different. The kind of air purity their trees were providing by conversion of CO2 into oxygen was tremendous. You can suddenly think that a hill which is full, it has 500 trees, and suddenly it has a bare stones, you know, and the building coming up there, likely to be. So unfortunately, that person suffered a lot of setback, but the idea was threefold. One was to convey to people the message that it's not fair and you cannot do it against the law to cut trees indiscriminately without proper permission and without proper planning of restoration and rejuvenation of the environment at that place. Secondly, if you have attempted to do, you are liable to pay environmental compensation. Third, which was most significant, was that you will do, the parameters of law would not permit you to go scot-free. You will have to pay the ultimate compensation, which may run to any amount, ultimately. So this was one of the examples I gave you on the suo motu action. Please tell me when, oh, 0, good. So that gives me the marks of 0 at the end of the talk. So I really thank all of you for being such good, patient listeners. And I hope I have been able to give you some information about the environmental jurisprudence in India. And just to conclude, I would say that the Indian courts and the tribunal has been very progressive on environmental issues. When you are progressive on an issue, it does invite criticism. And criticism could be fair, it could be unfair, but you are supposed to take the criticism healthily. And that's what we do. But that does not divulge us from the path of protecting the environment, which the National Green Tribunal does. And I invite all of you to India. Whenever you come, feel free to visit the National Green Tribunal. We'll be too happy and too glad to have any good environmentalist who comes here and who really says, I often say, that dangerous is the class who love nature, but the people who care for nature are the best people to be environmentalists. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Professor Broder is next, and Alexandra Avery. Can I just point out we're very happy to have Alexandra here. She's a former executive director, president of Outdoor Circle of Hawaii, which was instrumental in creating the Environmental Court. And she had the great fortune of visiting Justice Kumar at the National Green Tribunal in Delhi for several days last year, and what an experience. So all these connections, so he means it when he says, come visit him. It's an extraordinary experience. I could have sat there for days actually, but the dean wouldn't let me. But I'll come back and I'll sit there, and it's an extraordinary court, and we have a lot to learn. Next, Sherry Broder, who's an invaluable member of our faculty, and take it away, Sherry.
Aloha, everyone. I have the great privilege of talking about international environmental cases, and one of the things I think that's been happening in the last 2 decades is really the development of international environmental law. It's more difficult at the international level for courts to issue decisions and have them followed because there's no police force to back it up. So if, say, after the decision by the Permanent Court of Arbitration, if China doesn't like it, and says that they won't follow it and they're going to continue to do reclamation in the South China Sea, how are we going to implement it? How is the world going to force them to stop, assuming that the decision doesn't go in their favor? But I think that courts, that what's been happening is that internationally, courts are asserting themselves more, and we're seeing more decisions coming out, and especially in the field of environmental law. So here's an example. This case was just decided 2.5 years ago, and this was where the Greenpeace protesters were protesting drilling in the Arctic, and they this is a huge Russian drilling platform, and they drill in the Arctic there. And Russia's even now talking about having floating nuclear power plants to supply power to these oil rig platforms that they have. And so they tried to scale the walls, and their protesters, and they were arrested and put in prison in Siberia in Russia and charged with crimes that carry a penalty of 14 years. So here's where they were. You can see they're up there where it's a pretty rugged environment. And Russia refused to participate in the proceedings, and said that when they signed the Law of the Sea Convention, that they said that law enforcement activities were not going to be, they weren't submitting to international jurisdiction for that reason. And so the question was, well, if Russia refuses to participate, then what happens? Can the court go ahead and make a decision? So what's going to happen at the international level when nations refuse to participate? And this happens in other circumstances. And what is the country that's going to say they don't want to participate? Well, of course, the one that thinks that they're going to lose, So that's just like maybe in the kinds of cases that Judge Kumar was referring to, where the one for whom the order goes against is the one that doesn't like the judge, doesn't like the court, or whatever. So Russia said, we refuse to participate. But the court said, well, they gave Russia the opportunity to participate, and they didn't participate, and their failure to participate didn't give them a veto power over the case. And they went ahead, and I think that Justice Wolfram made a very good point, and I think we're going to see this again in international cases where countries are going to try to get out from under what they perceive as a bad ruling coming up, especially in the environmental arena. So just Judges Wolfram and Kelly from Germany and Argentina said, non-appearance cripples the process and just leaves the outward shell of the dispute settlement system intact, but actually washes away the core. And they said, international courts and tribunals have a sole right to decide on their jurisdiction. So even in domestic courts, we see this, parties try to get out from under what they are afraid might happen to them in the court by saying that the court doesn't have any jurisdiction, or that it's a political question, or something like that. So these are some of the evolving principles of international environmental law. Some of the really important ones that we see being developed In international environmental law, these kinds of things, the duty to cooperate, that's like a really big thing because of the same principle, which is that you can't send the police force out to arrest people who don't follow orders of the court, or if you issue a money judgment or a fine for contempt of court, there's no way to really collect it. So something like the duty to cooperate is a tool that international courts use to try to force the parties to work harder to come to a resolution of matters. Another important principle is the polluter pays. So if you do pollute the environment, you're supposed to pay for it. I mean, that seems to make sense in the domestic arena, but in the international arena, it's harder to collect these judgments. It's harder to find treaties that allow for assessments of monetary fines and things like that. So the polluter pays principle is very important. No harm rule. You're not supposed to cause transboundary harm. So how is all of this going to end up in our climate change problems? You know, the polluter pays and the no harm rule. Well, it seems like the no harm rule is being violated every day, and the polluters haven't had to pay, at least not yet. And the no harm rule is a very old rule from 1941. From a very famous case decided by the International Court of Justice. So we see that these kinds of principles make their ways into treaties too. So the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, you know, includes the no harm rule. The Law of the Sea Convention, Article 194, includes provisions that, requirement that states shall take measures individually or jointly, all measures consistent with this convention that are necessary to prevent, reduce, and control pollution of the marine environment. So this was a big step forward, saying that all nations, and 197 nations have signed the Law of the Sea Convention, have ratified the Law of the Sea Convention. So this is a provision that all nations have to protect and prevent, reduce, and control pollution of the marine environment. So in the Nuclear Weapons Advisory Opinion, the International Court of Justice recognized that the environment is not an abstraction, but represents living space, the quality of life, and the very health of human beings, including generations unborn. So this goes to what Dean Antolini is working on for the IUCN. What is our obligation to future generations? Do we have the right to ruin the environment today without any thought to what's going to happen to future generations? So I would say that this is a good jumping off point, and it seems to be that it's certainly a principle of law that's been actually already recognized by courts. And also the court in that case and in the Pulp Mills case, which was decided in 2010, said it is the general obligation of states to ensure that activities within their jurisdiction and control respect the environment of other states. So again, this is the no harm rule. This is the rule against polluting your neighbor's jurisdiction. There's a very interesting case that just came out from the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, the seabed chambers. And this, of course, is of great interest to us here in Hawaii, because these manganese nodules, this deep seabed mining that's going to be happening, and exploration has already been started, is only the major site for these manganese nodules is only 500 miles from Hawaii. The second most desirable site is in the Indian Ocean. And so this is going to be, I think, an issue of great concern in India as well. So these nodules have been declared to be common heritage of mankind. And this is kind of the essence of why the United States backed out of ratifying the Law of the Sea Convention when Ronald Reagan was president. The United States position was it was first come, first get. So those with the technological know-how and the financial means should be able to get down there and get those nodules. So here are the two places, the Hawaii, you can see right outside of Hawaii, and in India. One thing that has happened is that there was a meeting here in Honolulu, people interested in the deep seabed mining, and this was about 15 years ago, and they came up with this plan that some of these areas should be set aside because these are areas nobody's ever been down there before. We don't even know what there is. So this group came up with a recommendation, which was actually eventually adopted by the International Seabed Authority, to set aside all of these white areas as preservation areas. So rather than just go on down there and start and get going on mining, these areas at least have been set aside for preservation. So these are just some of the beautiful pictures of the fabulous things down there. Okay, so then a case went to the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, because what was going to happen was in the provisions relating to the deep seabed mining, there's a section which gives a preference to developing states. And so what had happened was corporations went out and formed themselves in Nauru and Tonga to go do this. So this is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise to get down there and do this mining. You got to have robots and mining facilities that travel on the ocean and all of this and that. So obviously it's not Nauru and Tonga that's actually doing it. It's corporations, big corporations that are going to these countries and then trying to use this preferential thing that they have to go ahead and do the mining. So Nauru and Tonga, though, they wanted to know, like, what if something goes wrong? What's going to happen? Can we get sued? So this was the first time that there was an advisory opinion from the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. It was the first time that the Seabed Disputes Chambers had decided things. It was the first time that the tribunal actually reached a completely unanimous opinion. So this was a really great development, I think, in international environmental law, and just goes to show us what's happening, how this field is really developing, and we're going to be seeing more decisions. I think having a unanimous decision in international law is really important because it's so hard to get these decisions to be complied with if nations are going to oppose them. So when it's unanimous and you have decisions by judges from all over the world, it makes it seem more like everybody agrees. You know, there's no difference of opinion on these kinds of things. So you can see that Nauru and Tonga Tonga only has a GDP of $320 million, and you can see that the people signing aren't necessarily Tongans. So the court endorsed the principle of equality and actually rejected this idea that these sponsoring states of convenience would have a lower standard, that they could have this preference, because the court was very cognizant of what happens with flags of convenience, where if you fly the flag of the Seychelles, you fly the flag of Panama, and then you go out and engage in illegal fishing, and when you get back to the Seychelles, Panama, they don't do anything about it. So the court didn't want to have this kind of thing now start getting going in deep seabed mining, and so it was rejected by the court. And the court also found, and this is very significant, that if you did cause damage, you could be liable. The court found that sponsoring states are under an obligation to apply the precautionary approach. So now we see that the precautionary approach is part of international law and well accepted by international tribunals. And erga omnes character of harm to the environment. So the environment is raised to this erga omnes category, which is like the top category of things to be protected. So this is a fantastic decision, and the court said because of this erga omnes character of the environment, that there can be liability. You can get sued for this kind of thing. So in addition, the court found that you had to use best environmental practices. You had to have technical and financial guarantees from the contractors up front. So you can't just go off and do this kind of new activity and not worry, just walk away if it doesn't work out, file for bankruptcy or whatever. So you've got to, in advance, you have to prove technical and financial guarantees. And the court found that the requirement of an environmental impact assessment was part of international customary law. So anytime you engage in one of these kinds of activities from now on under international environmental law, you're going to have to do an environmental impact assessment. Okay, I have a lot more, but I say I got my 0 already.
So, as Benny, go ahead. As Benny uploads this, I wanted to say now, thank you, Sherry. Sherry is not only an extraordinary litigator. Some of you know about her amazing litigation history, which not is really history, it's current, but also a really, really gifted teacher, and we're very thankful to have you as part of the law school. The materials, so the unfinished slides, which remind me so much of John, right? The unfinished slides and all the materials will be uploaded onto our website. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Justice Mike Wilson, my co-conspirator on a lot of this effort. And take it away, Mike.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I am supposed to be finished by 2:15, so at least Justice Kumar got a couple minutes before he got his 0, and so it's been nice talking to you. Actually, how much time do I have? 15 minutes. Really? Oh, okay, great. Oh, thank you. Claire was my extern, so it's going to be really frustrating for me and not at all like her when she says, you know, I'm a 0.
The tables have turned.
Right. Okay. And this, you know, it's funny. I was in India. I bought this, and I looked, and it said made in Hawaii. Just kidding. All right. How many of you have heard about the Environmental Court? Raise your hand. Great. And how many of you have already gone through a presentation with the Environmental Court? Raise your hand. Great. Okay. So we've got a little bit of an addition to the presentation, and I'll go through it kind of quickly. But you can see now it's got sort of an international dimension to it, in part because of a man who's world famous and has actually made a big difference in a global basis in establishing environmental courts in the law, who came to Hawaii to help train our environmental judges. So it's with a certain amount of trepidation and a sense of great insecurity that I give this presentation in the presence of my hero, who I deeply love and admire, who is Justice Kumar. So with that said, if you would like to take a break, Justice Kumar, and all right, here we go. Environmental Court, a partner to India, Brazil, Australia, and China. This is what's been happening even though we've had an Environmental Court for over a year. A judicial path to 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Our Hawaii Court mentioned in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals that were developed in 2015. And why is that? Well, this is Hawaii from space. All of us that are here have a certain perspective about how important Hawaii is, but as you may recall, Chuck Brady, who was the man that had been in space longer than any other American in 1995, decided that Hawaii was the most beautiful place from space, and that was important because he developed a sense of anxiety about the deterioration of the Earth. And from space, when he would get into his exercise mode on his exercise bike and look out the window, the Earth would rotate every hour. So he saw the deterioration of major rivers, he saw the spread of huge cities that were starting to deplete areas, and as a consequence he decided he'd come to Hawaii and thank those that were taking care of what he thought was the most beautiful place on Earth. And this is the sort of thing, of course, that he saw from space. Even though many of us have seen it, it's worth remembering, because the reason that we're here, the reason we're talking about environmental law, and part of the reason why we have the Chief Justice of India and a great former justice is because of these magnificent resources that are not man-made, they're God-given. We have developed a need to try to take care of these in an institutionalized way that's now been handed over to the court through the environmental court legislation. This is a place that Professor Antolini saved. I often show this whenever I present this slide, and I thank her for that. But it's also an example of the type of thing that is very well situated to potentially go before the environmental court. Kawainui Marsh, this is a place that's splendid in a purely natural way, but in a cultural way as well. It's very profound. It was a center of Hawaiian culture during ancient Hawaiian times, and again, it's a reason why there are these discussions internationally about Hawaii, because of the amazing natural features we have with the most powerful cleansing agents on Earth working on Hawaii all the time, the cleanest air flowing across the largest wilderness on Earth, the cleanest ocean moving across at all times, and of course, the sun. These are treasures of great inspiration. To some, they're even spiritual inspiration. And it has spread globally. At a local level, there was a group on Maui that felt that we weren't doing enough and something needed to be done to try to take care of our natural resources. And that group I liken to India, because I've been to India and it's a place that has amazing amounts of commitment at a deep, deep psychological, spiritual level, despite the fact that it's extremely heavily populated and has great challenges in terms of things like natural resource management. And this is one of the extraordinary people of all human history who inspired Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King, of course, was an inspiration for us in many ways in terms of trying to address human rights and human dignity. And that connection between human rights and human dignity is a very direct one now internationally, as Professor Broder would well argue, I'm sure, because if you are contaminating large parts of the earth, particularly poor people, that's an intrusion on human dignity that's about as profound as it could be, as Justice Kumar said. We do not have life if we do not have a clean environment. And these are people who are those spirits that have been described of unquenchable faith that move forward despite the opposition, who end up in unlikely places. I mean, his grandfather was a slave, and we all know he was on the Supreme Court. Justice Richardson, again, came from very humble beginnings and ended up shaping the concept of the environment in some very direct ways, like, for example, where our beaches are supposed to be public. But this is somebody that didn't get to be quite so heroic and famous. This is Jan Dapatan. She is the godmother, she's the inspiration, she's the Joan of Arc for the Environmental Court, who on Maui worked tirelessly to try to put this proposition together. Why? Well, this is the Iao Aquifer on Maui. It says water levels in the Iao Aquifer have declined to nearly 1/2 of the pre-development water levels. This is a Pearl Harbor aquifer. How many people here have heard the word Pearl Harbor aquifer? Please raise your hand. Okay, great. Just about everybody knows a lot about the geologic miracle that underlies Oahu. We take 100 million gallons a day of water from it. Does anybody know what the water plan is for the future? Anybody understand what it is we're supposed to do in order to maintain our water supply so it doesn't have saltwater intrusion? Well, it's a difficult proposition even in a first world community like ours, because right now, if you start at the idea of taking care of our most important natural resource, which is drinking water, you of course will go to the watersheds. I don't have to remind anybody of that. But if you move forward and you are certainly among the top 1% educated people about the community that you're in, including natural resources. And if I ask you, have the watersheds been doing okay? I don't think you'd necessarily know that Hawaii has already lost half of its natural forest cover. Forested lands are our island's primary watersheds. That's a rather striking proposition, and to some people who are concerned, the environmental court is a way for us to do informed and considered management of that resource. And Maxine Burkett's not here, so I can speak very wild, exaggerated compliments about her husband, Josh Stambro, who put together this blueprint for action. I recommend it to all of you. It just came out and it talks about how we need another 100 million gallons a day of water. We take 100 million gallons from the Pearl Harbor Aquifer right now. And you know, the alternative to this could well be desalination. And if you feel that it's worth, given the kind of debt service that every citizen has to pay and all the children that you're going to have in the future, our debt service can also take on a couple $2 billion worth of desalination plants, then this particular alternative, that is conservation and, of our water supply, might not be as important. But that's what Josh argues here, along with the Hawaii Community Foundation and a lot of very well-known experts. One of the world's most acclaimed environmental jurists, Brazil Supreme Court Justice Antonio Benjamin, remarkable fellow. I had a chance to be with him in Brazil. If you ask him, you know, what is taking place in terms of environmental law, who is moving it forward, who are the giants, then one of the first names he comes up with is Justice Swatantra Kumar, who's sitting right here. So he will, I'm sure, appreciate what Antonio had to say. Single most important legal issue facing judges globally is climate change. Our mayor said the same thing, because he's quite aware that climate change means that the water will rise and Waikiki, our golden egg, could be in trouble. I wanted to make sure and get to this slide. This is a new one. Brendan Mackey is one of the great scientists of the world who helped with the climate change discussions. It resulted in the climate change agreement that 195 nations, including China, India, and the United States, participated in Paris in 2015. And this chart shows what would happen at 2 degrees and what would happen at 4 degrees. So at 2 degrees, this is the percentage of loss of maize, which is a very important grain. That's it. We'd have nearly 20% at 2 degrees, 40% if we were talking about 4 degrees. If we move to something like plants in general, the loss to the planet at 2 degrees would be approximately 20%, and it could be as much as 60% if it was 4 degrees. In terms of mammals, at 2 degrees, it's approximately 20% and goes up to 40% at 4 degrees. In terms of coastal floods, at 2 degrees, an estimated 2 million people would be exposed to flooding. At 4 degrees, it'd be 13 million. For river floods, 130 million at 2 degrees, 250 million at 4 degrees. Water stress, people that would have inadequate amounts of water. At 2 degrees, it'd be 2 billion. And it'd be 1.5 at 2 degrees and 2 billion at 4 degrees. I want to take a little bit of time to bring climate change into perspective. We're going to have our sea level rise go up, but the kind of displacement and suffering that's going to take place in the world just from those degrees is so extraordinary, it gives you an idea why so many leaders came together to formally commit their countries to trying to lower fossil fuels so that we don't get to 2 degrees. Agenda for Sustainable Development. These are the benchmarks for sustainable development that were reached again by the world community. And part of the reason that the world community came together is to try to deal with responsible production and consumption. This is a slide that's becoming famous because of Dean Antolini, who showed this in Rio, to try to get the attention of people about what does it mean if we aren't adequately processing the waste that's produced by humanity. This is a garbage wave. It comes from Malaysia, but it makes the point, I think, about how this climate change issue or the idea of not having sustainable development is going to have a real impact on Hawaii. Paris Climate Conference. My goodness, the President of the United States taking a leadership position, saying the United States needs to participate in reducing fossil fuels because of climate change. So why are Hawaii's unique environmental laws so important? It's because this is what the world needs. A model like our environmental court that covers civil and criminal cases in all matters that involve land, air, and water. The life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. We are the citadel of the world in terms of taking care of our natural resources from a legal point of view and a theoretical point of view. From an authentic point of view in terms of whether we treat them properly, we manage them properly. All of you in this room are on the road that's going to lead in one direction or another. It's not clear at this point. Are we going to stay on the same road of degradation and exploitation? Are we going to move more towards a road to sustainable development? The University of Hawaii Law School is going to make a big difference in this regard. So, I will take you past some of our great environmental laws, which you're probably familiar with, to conclude with a short subject of great importance about our unique court and what has happened as a result of the international attention that has come to Hawaii. This is Ashoka, one of the great leaders of the world. He predated Jesus Christ and introduced the idea of human dignity that is translated into a respect for the environment in a respect for non-human living things. Justice Kumar is part of the tradition, as is the Chief Justice of India, a tradition of human dignity that has an element of endurance and courage that maintains despite 1.5 billion people, despite 20 million cases that have to be processed every year, despite the fact that each of the justices on the court are responsible for 18,000 cases. They haven't given up, and they've created the most powerful environmental court in the world. It makes sense, therefore, that Hawaii ought to be able, with the partnership of India, to have a sustained, institutionalized commitment to responsible application of environmental laws through an environmental court. These are just judges from around the world that have helped us. These are cases that are famous to Hawaii in terms of environmental law. This is a Global Judicial Institute for the Environment that now is being, as you probably know, going to be endorsed in September by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature when 6,000 people come here. And Antonio Benjamin is in charge of this effort. He's in charge of the commission. And Antonio's point that he makes when he speaks about environmental courts is that Hawaii's is the model for the world. China. China has now committed to the IUCN and is now establishing over 250 environmental courts. These are two of the great avatars of environmental law in the world. They've been to India and they speak internationally. They are my inspiration heroes, and I wanted to make sure and get to this. On the right, you have an environmental lawyer that's a woman, who's Joan of Arc. On the left, you have the environmental lawyer that's a man. And they deserve to be considered that way in Hawaii because you have such an exciting, daunting, heroic effort ahead of you. This is the great judge from Maui. He's been around a long time that said environmental courts are historic. And finally, this is an extraordinary person who, as you know, has put together a partnership with your law school and helped arrange externs for our Supreme Court and is right on the cutting edge with the best law school in India of moving into a new realm where international environmental law is not just studied, but it's taken seriously. And here they are. These are our externs who are now with our court that are part of the partnership. This is our Supreme Court. This is a picture that I show. I don't know if Justice McKenna has seen it before, but it makes it look like we really know what we're doing. It's a really nice picture. This is us with the externs. That's my favorite animal in the world that India has saved for over 2,000 years. And this is just about the end, but none of this, whether we're talking about externs, whether we're talking about the environmental courts, whether we're talking about a future with responsible decision-making, is possible without the Chief Justice. And he has been extraordinarily committed, despite all of his effort, despite all of his other commitments, very, very supportive of this effort. So I like to show this airbrushed picture. He really is, he looks a lot like that, but not quite that rested. So and because Justice Kumar is here and I love to do this, I'm going to say aloha and namaste, because namaste is the Indian term, interesting enough, a very practical example of why we have this partnership and why we're in two unique cultures. We come together so much, India and Hawaii. You know, namaste recognizes the God in everybody, the spirit in everybody, the beauty in everybody. And of course, aloha does too. It's the breath of life. And I have had the great pleasure of being inspired by Justice Kumar, being in his house for dinner. And now I have, and you're all welcome to see it, maybe the coolest thing in Hawaii, which is this magnificent marble figurine of this magnificent goddess called Druga. And Druga is a manifestation of another very inspiring goddess, is one of the main goddesses in the pantheon of the Hindu religion, whose name is Parvati. But Druga is the goddess of the tiger. And this is a very beautiful statue I have that's quite inspiring. It's in my office. So you're all welcome to see it. Thank you very much. I'm finished. Yeah.
Wow, we're in the kind of the final, now we're getting down to the nuts and bolts, now that Judge Richardson and Judge Castanetti are here. We are now going to shift into the part of the technical session where we're going to try to answer the question, what has been happening in the environmental court for the last year? And we are extraordinarily fortunate to have two of the leaders in the environmental court, part of the environmental court working group, but they also both have leadership positions here on Oahu. And after Judge Richardson and Judge Castanetti, then you'll hear from our law fellows who've been working with them and with me and Justice Wilson. It's been a big collective effort on trying to keep the court moving and to strengthen it where possible. So without further ado and without fancy titles, we're so fortunate to have Judge Richardson here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me today and allowing me to get you caught up on how the environmental courts are working in the district court level. And as you can see, the district court environmental judges handle criminal cases involving violation of conservation and resource laws. And this Hawaii model of environmental court system, which is a term that Brazil's Justice Antonio Benjamin has described our court, and it's the first of its kind in the U.S. In the first 11 months of the environmental court's existence, there were 1,615 cases with 1,670 counts of environmental law violations filed in the district courts across the state. And as you can see, they involve violations of aquatic resource, forestry and wildlife, state park, boating, and ocean recreation, aquatic resources and wildlife violations, among others. A couple of examples of the types of violations that we have been hearing, the types of cases we've been hearing. Many have to do with taking more than one share of ulua or papio, taking undersized he'e or octopus, taco, entering state parks where prohibited. Interestingly, people don't care if it's dangerous. They just go into the park as they wish. And many of our cases, let's see, going back to that slide on the numbers, the state park violations, 804 of the charges in the last 11 months have been entering or camping in a state park without a permit. And I would like to show you a vivid video that is Dan Dennison here. Dan helped put together, or maybe he just did it all by himself. And he was kind enough to do a little clip for me. So here it is. And you'll see how being in a park without a permit has really caused havoc.
It's all about questioning you, okay? Understand?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Beginning late in 2015, officers from the Department of Land and Natural Resources, DLNR Division of Conservation and Resources Enforcement, DOCARE, conducted a series of sweeps in the Kalalau section of the Na Pali Coast State Wilderness Park.
Okay.
They issued dozens of citations to hikers and campers who were present in the area without the required state permit. They posted numerous large illegal campsites believed to be used as bases of operations for illegal transportation operations. During a day of high surf, one jet ski operator made a dozen trips from a boat waiting offshore to Kalalau Beach.
From our experience in doing enforcement, a lot of the stuff is boated in or brought in by jet skis or Zodiacs. Summertime, a lot of small little boats, Zodiacs. And wintertime, we're seeing the jet skis that can maneuver better around the big swells, bringing in stuff that way. So a lot of stuff is transported and brought in by the ocean, through the ocean.
There were no DOCARE officers present to monitor this activity.
This is a commercial activity, and this is a business venture of guys making a lot of money, bringing people in and out of this area, which is, my opinion, as an enforcer, is a really dangerous situation because a lot of the illegals that transport people back and forth, they're not really having safety in mind as far as overloading the boats. The elements coming in on the big surf, anything could happen. You know, even the most experienced jet ski operator could get in trouble and lose a passenger and end up drowning or something.
Several months later, DOCARE officers were on hand when another jet ski landed on the beach at Kalalau. Officers, along with State Parks maintenance crews, had just finished dismantling an elaborate camp, which they say had been used as a remote operations base for years, if not decades. The camp had been bagged up, ready to be flown out. Weeks earlier, this was one of the camps that had been tagged as being illegal, with a warning that it would be taken apart. Clearly, the accumulation of junk did not happen overnight, and it is not the kind of stuff someone would carry in on their backs.
Good. It's just very irresponsible. I don't understand how people could be this irresponsible. I don't know. There's no way this stuff was hiked in. This was all brought in by a boat. And it all doesn't go out. So State Parks is left with having to remove this stuff via helicopter.
Officers say illegal boat jet ski operations are largely responsible for despoiling this wilderness park. Shutting them down, they say, will return the Na Pali to more of its remote wilderness character, something that has already been hailed by hikers and backpackers who take the time to get required state permits before entering Hawaii's most photographed and preeminent state park. Regular once or twice a month maintenance visits by state parks crews reveal the visual and environmental damage that the illegal campers have wrought.
It makes me really mad because a lot of tax money needs to be taken, which it could go somewhere else with education or so forth. But a lot of our tax, like you said, I'm a taxpayer. A lot of our tax money is being used to take care and clean up Na Pali Coast with all this illegal activity. And I'm pretty upset with that. Yeah.
Prior to stepped-up enforcement efforts, state parks crews were regularly airlifting dozens of sling loads of rubbish out of the Kalalau area. From their most recent visit in May 2016, the crew leader reports his team only collected 2 large bags of trash, compared to 20 or more during previous trips. These clips are taken from a DLNR-produced 30-minute television special, Renegades, Risks, and Rewards of the Na Pali Coast, which has or will air 4 times on Honolulu station K5TV.
And again, thank Dan Dennison for helping me get this. You know, when the environmental court started, one of the things that the judges realized is that, you know, you can hear one case and then another, but if you compile all of the data from the district courts around the state, that's what we're doing. Hopefully, little by little, the courts will be a part of helping to educate the public. And so the judiciary is committed to continuing its efforts to assist in educating the public about preserving and protecting our natural resources, and to craft appropriate sentences in environmental court cases, which was highlighted this morning by the signing of the bill. And you're going to hear from our DoCare, I'm sorry, is it DoCare? DoCare, John Foster, and DAR, David Sakota. And the judiciary is also committed to being proactive. And I want to just show you how this is happening. In the Fifth Circuit, they're leading the way. And just want you to know that in Kauai, they have 10 active community service work sites appropriate for those convicted in environmental court cases, with approximately 50 court referrals at any given time. And since July of 2015, 708 hours of this type of community service work was processed. And that's a lot to do with our renegade judge on Kauai. And I think that we're just going to continue to make progress. And I thank you for allowing me to speak. And now we have Judge Castanetti.
Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeanette Castagnetti. I'm a circuit court judge in the First Circuit here on Oahu. I've been a circuit court judge for 5 years. Prior to that, I was a per diem judge in district court while I was also in private practice. It's really a privilege and an honor to be here today to give you an update of the environmental courts in the circuit courts on all circuits for the state. Let me just go on to, I know we're a little behind schedule. I'm just going to cover these 4 areas. I'll go over just a brief overview of the environmental courts in circuit court, the jurisdictional statute, the types of proceedings that we see in circuit courts involving the environmental court matters. I'll talk also about the cases that have been filed since July 1, 2015, when environmental court first was established. And also I'm going to briefly mention some recent legislation that was passed this past session that does involve or impact environmental courts jurisdictional statute. So moving on then to the jurisdiction of the environmental courts, and I know most of you here already know this. The environmental courts shall have exclusive original jurisdiction over all proceedings, including judicial review of administrative proceedings and proceedings for declaratory judgment on the validity of agency rules authorized under Chapter 91, arising under Chapters 6D, 6E, 6K, etc. If you count all of the Hawaii Revised Statute chapters that are enumerated in the jurisdiction provision for environmental courts, there are 60 chapters from the Hawaii Revised Statutes that are included. Some of the types of chapters or laws that we'll see in circuit court and have seen involve historic preservation under Chapter 6E, air pollution control under Chapter 342B. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. There was an environmental court case on Maui that involved that chapter. Water pollution under Chapter 342D, safe drinking water, solid waste pollution, and Chapter 343, the Hawaii Environmental Policy Act, otherwise known as HEPA. Now, the types of proceedings that we see in circuit court, I know this is very general overview, but we do hear civil cases. Mostly those are cases that will involve claims for declaratory and injunctive relief involving the enumerated chapters set forth in 604A-2. We also hear criminal cases, jury trials, so misdemeanor jury demand cases for criminal offenses as well as felony offenses. And we also hear agency, what I'm calling agency proceedings. Those, of course, involve judicial review of contested cases before administrative agencies, so judicial review of final decisions and orders or certain preliminary rulings of a certain nature in contested cases under Section 91-14A. Also, declaratory judgment cases or declaratory judgment actions on agency rules concerning the validity of agency rules under HRS Section 91-7. So let's get to the stuff that I think you folks really want to hear about, and that's sort of the types of cases or the specific cases that have been filed since July 1, 2015. So the very first case that was filed in circuit court was on July 1st, 2015 in the Second Circuit. I think the plaintiffs were lying in wait, waiting for the opportunity to file their case. That case was called Stop Cane Burning versus Hawaii Department of Health and Alexander and Baldwin. It had been in the media. So some of you may have read about that case. I don't know if there are any lawyers who participate in that case who are here today. But again, that was in the Second Circuit. That was before Judge Cardoza. And, let me just also say, too, that the cases that I'm talking about specifically some of them are still pending cases, and I'm not saying anything here today that's not already part of the public record. So let me just make sure everybody understands that. Now back to the Stop Cane Burning case versus Hawaii Department of Health. That case involved a number of claims, one of which included Chapter 342B involving air pollution control. As I'm sure you can imagine from the title of the case, you can get a sense of what the case was about. But in that case, what the plaintiffs did is they filed an action for declaratory and injunctive relief and claimed a number of things, but among them was that Chapter 342B of the Hawaii Revised Statutes violated the Hawaii Constitution, first as an unlawful delegation of legislative power, and also that the ongoing authorization of cane burning violated individuals' right to a clean and healthful environment under Article 12, Section 9 of the Hawaii Constitution. Now, the parties engaged in various motions that were heard by Judge Cardoza, and eventually the parties were able to reach a settlement agreement. And that settlement agreement included Alexander and Baldwin agreeing to stop cane burning by the end of late December 2016. And on June 1st, 2016, there was a dismissal of the case by stipulation. That was on June 1st, 2016. So maybe about 11 months later was when the case was resolved. Now, as for the other circuits and the other proceedings that we've seen and types of cases that we've had, we do not have the volume that district court has. We are nowhere near the 1,600 cases that Judge Richardson talked about. Statewide, we've had 11 civil and agency-related cases filed in all circuits. So in the state of Hawaii, of course, you folks all know we have 4 circuits. First Circuit, Oahu, Second Circuit, Maui, Lanai and Molokai, Third Circuit being the island of Hawaii or the Big Island, and then the Fifth Circuit being Kauai. So in the First Circuit, we have had 4 environmental court cases filed that are of a civil nature or involve agency proceedings. 3 are still pending. The first one was dismissed without prejudice by stipulation of the parties. Of the 3 cases that are pending, 2 cases involve declaratory and injunctive relief concerning violations under Chapter 343 or the Hawaii Environmental Policy Act. You know, that's the chapter that deals with environmental impact statements, environmental assessments, and the validity of those determinations. The third case that is still pending involves judicial review of an agency's decision or ruling on revocable permits. More specifically, it involves the Department of Land and Natural Resources revocable permits that were issued concerning use of state land and diversion of stream water in East Maui. In the Second Circuit, they have had a total of 3 civil and agency type proceedings. The one case, of course, is the Stop Cane Burning case, and that case settled, as I've mentioned. The other 2 cases that are pending involve requests for declaratory and injunctive relief, again regarding claim violations of Chapter 343 or HEPA, or the Environmental Policy Act. The Third Circuit has 3 civil cases pending. The environmental court judge there's 2 judges, environmental court judges on the Third Circuit in Circuit Court. That's Judge Ibarra and Judge Nakamura. 3 of the civil cases that are pending involve requests for declaratory and injunctive relief. One of those cases involves Native Hawaiians' access to Mauna Kea and implementation of an administrative rule adopted by the Board of Land and Natural Resources restricting access to Mauna Kea. The other case, the other civil case, is a request for an environmental impact statement under Chapter 343 again, regarding proposed geothermal exploration on the west side of the island of Hawaii. The third civil case that is still pending is a recently filed case, and I just don't have any information about that case. On Kauai, there has been 1 civil case, and again, that one is a matter that was just recently filed. Now, I know on the agenda, I think I was supposed to talk about just the civil cases, but I did look at some statistics regarding any criminal cases that have been filed in the environmental courts in Circuit Court. And again, unlike District Court, we don't reach the 1,600 number, but we've had 10 criminal cases filed in all circuits statewide. Of those, First Circuit has had 1 criminal offense, or 1 criminal case. That case came and went through Circuit Court very quickly. There was a jury demand case from District Court, and once it got to Circuit Court, the prosecutor's office amended the charge to a petty misdemeanor, and the case was remanded back to District Court. Second Circuit, Maui does win the prize for the most criminal cases in Circuit Court, in environmental court. The majority of the cases in the Second Circuit involve hunting on private lands. In the Third Circuit, there have been 2 criminal cases filed, one involving an offense for hunting with a firearm without a permit and other non-environmental court-related offenses, and also camping without a permit in Ka'u Forest Reserve. In the Fifth Circuit, there was a recently filed criminal case involving a felony offense of taking a monk seal in violation of Section 195D-4.5 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. The charge is a Class C felony that's punishable by up to 5 years in jail, 5 years in prison, and up to a $50,000 fine. The case is set for a jury trial on September 19th, 2016, before Judge Watanabe on Kauai. Other related environmental court matters, one thing I just did want to touch on briefly is Act 48. If you're not already aware, on May 10th, 2016, Governor Ige signed into law House Bill 1581, which allows for direct appeals to the Hawaii Supreme Court of final decisions and orders, or certain preliminary rulings in contested cases in proceedings arising under various chapters of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. 2 of the chapters that are mentioned in Act 48 are the State Water Code, Chapter 174C, and Conservation Districts, Chapter 183C. Both of those chapters are mentioned in 604A-2, the first jurisdictional provision slide that I went over. So what happens with this act, which takes effect August 1st, 2016, is that for contested cases under Chapter 91 involving either the State Water Code or Conservation Districts, 174C or 183C, then there's no appeal to environmental court. as 604A-2 would allow. Instead, the appeals would go directly to the Hawaii Supreme Court. So again, in other words, effective August 1st, 2016, Environmental Court would no longer have exclusive original jurisdiction over agency appeals involving final decisions and orders, or certain preliminary rulings in contested cases involving the State Water Code and the Conservation District Code. So that is my update for the environmental court cases in circuit court. So thank you all very much for allowing me to be here.
So I just continue to be amazed by Judge Richardson and Judge Castanetti and their leadership, and even I learned a lot, and we've been trying to keep up ourselves, so thank you so much. I think that presentation is so invaluable, not only for us in the room, but I know people are going to watch this all around the state to try to figure out what's been going on with the court, so mahalo. So next we have two very impressive young men who have been part of the Environmental Law Program's Law Fellows program. Some of you know we have been fortunate through the generosity of various foundations and agencies to have established a law fellowship program that right now has 6 post-JD law fellows. Some would say embedded at the Department of Land and Natural Resources as junior attorneys, in-house attorneys. David Sokota's at Division Aquatic Resources, John Foster's at DoCare, Maria Gatos, who was around here earlier today, is at Boating. We have 2 working on invasive species and another one that we're hiring right now. So John and David and I have been doing some traveling lately, and John started in January and dove right into the environmental court. And we've also been doing some traveling to find out what's going on in the neighbor islands. So John will give you an update, and we're very fortunate for all of his very hard work. So a lot of the effort that went into the bill this morning was these 2 fine gentlemen and their team at DLNR. So thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. My name is John Foster. I am the legal fellow at DoCare. It's the Division of Conservation and Resource Enforcement. It's the law enforcement agency that's tasked with enforcing all of these new laws that come through the environmental court. Most of the cases that I see come through district court. They're petty misdemeanors. I'm funded to pursue aquatics violations, but I see the state parks violations, the boating violations, which have an aquatic nexus as well. But one of the things that was apparent from the get-go when the environmental court was conceived and that the judiciary through its working group requested was flexibility in sentencing alternatives. Really just realizing that taking a one-size-fits-all approach to resource crimes doesn't really do justice to the nuanced nature and oftentimes the aggravating or mitigating factors that might come along with those crimes. So I've been observing district court as much as I can and been seeing a lot of those cases. So I may bring up a few examples along the way as I take you through basically the new asset law that Governor Ige signed into being this morning. So without further ado, let's start talking about it. So as I mentioned earlier, to begin with, the judiciary was restricted to fining defendants for resource cases. Oh. How's that? All right. Now we're cooking with gas. So the law as it stood before this morning restricted the judiciary to fining resource violators. And most of our statutes provide for a mandatory minimum fine, usually either $100 or $250. So it's not adaptable to the nuances inherent in many resource cases. We see a lot of cases where people just, for excusable reasons, didn't know that what they were doing was wrong. And so Senate Bill 2453 provides the judiciary with these additional sentencing tools. They can sentence offenders to an educational course in addition to or in lieu of a fine, or they can choose to substitute community service in lieu of the fine. So this is,
really the purpose of giving the judiciary this flexibility is to allow judges to affect future behavior by crafting sentences that have a lasting impact. And a lot of the cases that I see in district court, they're not your typical defendants. They're people who don't have prior criminal histories. They're people who are impoverished. They're fishing for sustenance, so on and so forth. So the educational course, as I believe Denise Antolini mentioned this morning, the department has an educational curriculum that it's developed and that we use to train community partners who basically do neighborhood watch for shoreline areas. So the idea is to take this educational course and turn it into an online and eventually an in-person class, and use it to sentence offenders who just simply didn't know. And because Hawaii doesn't have a fishing license requirement, what we see with a lot of our aquatics violations is there's no educational course to take before you get your license. So people tend to be ignorant about areas of aquatic extractive use. So what this does is it allows us to catch some of these people on the back end. And rather than simply fining somebody for perhaps taking a female lobster, as one of these fellows in the photo may have done, we have the chance to sentence them to an educational course and teach them about the broad body of resource law. And so that's really important because it teaches them not just about why this activity is prescribed, but also about where it fits in the framework. And that's particularly important because a lot of our resource laws here in Hawaii are tied back to traditional Hawaiian management principles. So you can see in this picture, we have some guys, they're all holding lobsters, and does anyone know how to tell if a lobster is male or female? So a couple people, you can't tell when you're on top of the water and you're looking down on it. You have to swim down and grab the lobster and turn it over and look. And the swimmerlets that look like scales will be different on the males and the females, or the female may be full of eggs, in which case it's very apparent. But for that reason, we don't allow a take by spear because you usually spear it before you can identify the sex. And then lobsters are also pretty heavily regulated. We have a closed season, May through August, and take of females is always prohibited. So this is, unfortunately, lobster are not too common on Oahu anymore, but it's a pretty much a poster child case. Somebody go out and spear a lobster and just get excited and see it and say, I want to have a lobster for dinner. So community service is the other option that the judiciary now has. And for certain offenders, fines are just a cost of doing business. And I was going to use a sale of lobster, but actually, Judge Richardson, you gave me the perfect example with your presentation. Cost of doing business, these people that are operating in Kalalau, bringing in tourists for money or bringing in booze and selling it to tourists for money, they are making a lot of money. Not too long ago, you could go on Craigslist and get a ride into Kalalau for $200. And from what we hear, that's still going on today. So community service has a particularly promising deterrent effect here because when you sentence one of these offenders to a fine, they can pay it out of pocket and go back to making money. But if you hit them with a significant amount of community service, you take them off the water, you put a halt, even if it's just a temporary halt, to their commercial activity. And so the lost profits hurt these offenders a lot more than a fine. And we see that with a lot of our commercial marine dealers too. The other great thing about community service is it's restorative justice. And I believe, Justice Kumar, you were talking about dignity. And I think that resource-specific community service, it confers a benefit on the resource, but I think it also gives dignity to defendants to be able to work in the resource and to be able to say, I built that fish pond or I built that fence upland to protect native species. And so I think that it really empowers defendants and ties them to the resource. And we hope that it'll really reduce recidivism and give people a sense of really inherent pride in protecting the resource and hopefully change behavior that way. So some of the challenges that we're going to face from a departmental perspective with the asset program is our educational course. We face a lot of language barriers in district court. Plenty of our defendants who just didn't know are non-English speakers who weren't able to read the English signs. And so one of the things that we're very eager to do is to make sure that we adapt that educational course into other languages. And then we'd also like to have in-person courses for those people who lack internet access or don't use computers. In community service, right now we're looking for resource-specific community service partners. So I wanted to give a little plug if anyone knows nonprofit or government agencies that want to work with DLNR and the judiciary to provide meaningful resource-specific community service opportunities. We're very eager to talk to you, talk to myself, David, or Denise. And we're also looking to make sure that we have broad coverage. We don't want to have people on Maui needing to travel to Oahu because we only have one community service partner here. And finally, the thing that community service partners should keep in mind is that there will be a need for supervision. So I ran out of time a little while ago, but I just wanted to say a mahalo and fish pono. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'll use this. My name is David Sakota. I'm the Marine Law Fellow with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Aquatic Resources. Also a proud graduate of this law school, class of 2010. I've been with DLNR for about 3 years. Before that, I was clerking for Judge Gary Chang at the First Circuit Court. So we've heard a lot about Hawaii's environmental court, what's been going on the last year or so, the new tools that it's being given with this new legislation. I'm going to talk a little bit about another tool. It's actually an alternative to the criminal district court system. It's called the Civil Resource Violation System, or CRVS. And basically what the intent of this system is to divert low-impact environmental cases away from the criminal district court system, and alternatively, they will be handled in-house by DLNR administratively. So before I talk about what this system is, I'm just going to give a hypothetical example of a low-impact case and how it would proceed through the district court system presently, and then I'll talk about CRVS and then compare the two systems. So for a hypothetical, we'll just take John Doe, we'll call him JD for short, and he's visiting from the mainland. You know, he hears about this sport of spearfishing and he wants to give it a shot. So he goes to the store and buys some equipment. He looks online to find out what kind of fish are edible or good eating, and he jumps in the water and swims around. And, you know, he's in Waikiki, so he doesn't see much fish, but he does see some manini. Convict tang, it's the white fish with the vertical black stripes. And a lot of you might recognize the term manini because it's kind of local slang for small or insignificant. And if you actually see a manini, they don't get much bigger than your hand size. And so, relatively speaking, they're pretty insignificant when you consider the total amount of fish in the ocean. Anyways, JD goes and spears a few small manini, not really knowing the regulations. You know, he's proud, he has dinner, walking up the beach, and there's a doe care officer waiting for him. And the doe care officer notices that he has some regulated species, because manini, under state law, have a minimum size limit of 5 inches. And so the doe care officer proceeds to measure his catch, and determines that all of his fish are just shy of 5 inches. So the officer writes him a ticket, hands it to JD, and says, you have to show up for this court date. So fast forward, JD has to buy a plane ticket back to Hawaii, show up for his court date, and he's hoping to just deal with it, pay the fine, get it over with. But when he shows up to court, the judge tells him that it's a petty misdemeanor, and it's also $100 mandatory for a first offense. But because it's a criminal penalty, he really needs to talk to a public defender or an attorney, because there's rights that he might give up by just pleading out. So the judge tells him to contact the PD and reschedules for another hearing. So JD has to come back to Hawaii another time for another hearing. And fast forward to this second hearing, best case scenario, all the parties are there, PD, prosecutor, the defendant, the doe care officer as a witness. And best case scenario, they reach a plea deal and the case is done. But for the purposes of this hypo, perhaps the prosecutor is not ready to go to trial or reach a plea deal. Or perhaps the defense attorney finds some flaws in how the evidence was handled and wants to file a motion to suppress evidence. So the judge sets some motions deadlines and schedules a motion on the hearings, a pretrial motion on the pretrial hearing on the motions. And so they have to come back a third time for that pretrial hearing. Again, all parties are there. And perhaps the judge does suppress some of the evidence, but there's still enough left to go forward with trial. They have to come back a fourth time for the trial. And at this point, it doesn't really matter if they go to trial or if, the case settles or if he pleads out. At that point, there's been so much resources expended. You have to think of the court time, the judge's time, the airfare for the defendant to fly back to Hawaii at least 2 times, sometimes up to 4 times. And the officer, the doe care officer who's the witness, who wrote him the ticket, has to be there in court ready to go to trial each time. So that's pulling him out of the field. He's not doing enforcement, he's sitting in court. So when you consider all of these things, is it worth it for a Manini violation? So what is the alternative? And that's where CRVS comes into play. And I'll quickly go through it. Instead of a criminal citation, the officer issues a civil citation. And on it, it tells the respondent that he must respond within 21 days or face higher fines. And the fine is written on the citation. And he has 3 options. He can either admit and pay. So this is great in the case if JD is on the mainland, he can just write a check, say admit, and send a check to DLNR. Second option, admit but request a mitigation of the fine, or contest the citation, request a hearing. So with these options, it keeps the case out of the district court. The defendant or respondent doesn't have to go to court. And so what are the benefits of using this system for low impact cases? First of all, it's an additional enforcement tool for doe care officers. Doesn't fully replace criminal tickets. It just adds another tool. One big bonus for the defendant is it will not give him a criminal record. This is important, especially for certain occupations, military or say law students, where a criminal mark on your record might prohibit you from sitting for the bar or getting promoted in a certain job. So that's a big consideration. It reduces burdens on the courts, as I've discussed. There's a lower evidentiary burden of proof under the civil side, preponderance of the evidence versus beyond a reasonable doubt. monetary fines collected by the agency stay within DLNR and can be funneled back towards enforcement, rather than in district court, they go to the general fund. And finally, administrative fines will be more closely tied to the value of the resource, leading to more consistent imposition of penalties. And I have to say, though, that these last two are being done now that we have an environmental court and we have judges and prosecutors who are becoming more familiar with the importance of our natural resource laws. So they are able to give more consistent penalties. I think that's all that I have to say. Well, sorry, one more thing about the implementation of it. I know I'm past my time, but there's a lot of considerations that DLNR has to take into account in implementing CRVS, because yes, we are taking a burden off of the court, but we'll be putting that burden on the administration. So we'll have to develop the civil citation forms. We'll have to train officers in how to use them. We may have to hire new staff, such as hearings officers. And so I've been working with John Foster, the DoCare Fellow, to possibly pilot the program for maybe one area or for a period of time, just to see what the administrative burden looks like. And we hope to roll it out, maybe within the next year or so. But that's the status of it now. So thank you.
Nice little local joke in there. Thank you. One of the things I want to mention is one of the goals of this post-JD fellowship program is to launch careers, and I'm very proud that Division of Aquatic Resources has found David Sakota so valuable that the position has become permanent. He's in the process of applying. And that's extraordinary that now they're going to have David in-house permanently, we hope, within a couple of short months.
I'm just waiting for my mic.
Which mic do you need?
Oh, I gotta take that one.
Oh, okay, do you want to take it now?
Sure. Thanks, Denise.
Yeah. Dan, whatever you want.
Oh,
you
thank
can
you.
have.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Okay, a couple of quick comments before I make a few, I guess, reflective comments and then introduce my IUCN students. One is I neglected to mention one of our law fellows who's extremely important. That's Addie Phillips. So I'll mention her again because her mother-in-law is here. I forgot to mention Addie Phillips, whose mother-in-law is Judge Richardson, and Addie recently was blessed to have a baby and a grandchild for Judge Richardson, so she is not currently working full-time, but Addie works on marine mitigation and protected species as a really valuable member of the team.